Good afternoon. Does it work? Yes, it works. Good afternoon. Welcome to all of you. There's still people coming, obviously, also as far as our panelists go. But we thought we'd start punctually. We've got such a full program, and we're very happy to see so many people here. There is an increasing number of briefings on the World Health Assembly being organized here in Geneva now, which is excellent. And different audiences can discuss the things that they are most interested in. I'd like to welcome you to the Graduate Institute for International and Development Studies, the Maison de la Paix, which is more and more playing a role of being a platform for many global discussions. And we've designated this week as a Global Health Week. You will have seen that there are many events here during the week with our focus, the focus of the Global Health Center, on issues of governance and health. And you will find materials out there, and I can see some of you have already taken a stack, and that's great. I'm Ilona Kickbusch. I head the Global Health Center, and I'd like to add my personal welcome. And we've been doing this event for a couple of years now, together with the UN Foundation, and in particular with Ambassador Lange, who is a senior fellow at the foundation, and I'd like to give him the word. Please, John.
Thank you very much, Ilona, and welcome to all of you. We have done this for 3 years in a row, and in fact, we have the most registrations ever this year. We're expecting more people and had 600 registrations because there's such great interest in preparing for the World Health Assembly. It's a very important venue, the world's premier venue to discuss global health issues. From my perspective, every issue under the sun in global health comes up in one way or another in official discussions or in side meetings. But this year, of course, is extremely important because it will really set the direction of global health for the next 5 years with the election of the new Director General. And for the first time in 10 years, there's a genuine race for this position, and we're particularly appreciative of the fact that it's a more open and more transparent process than ever before. We at the UN Foundation were delighted to work with Ilona and the Graduate Institute, as well as Chatham House, for the debate that took place here among the three candidates right on this stage on March 6th. I hope that you had a chance either to see that live or on the archived webcast on the Graduate Institute website. The UN Foundation, for those of you who don't know, was created by Ted Turner, who founded CNN in 1998. And our goal is to connect people, ideas, and resources to the UN. Here at the World Health Assembly, in addition to this event and some other events, we'll be working with WHO again this year on what is called World Health plus Social Good, which is a 45-minute live broadcast featuring discussions of key issues before the World Health Assembly, and that will take place 3 days during this coming week. You're invited to ask questions and engage in this conversation, which will be broadcast on both the WHO and the UN Foundation Facebook pages. So again, welcome to everyone. We're looking forward to a very productive discussion this afternoon, and our goal in the end is to have delegates and all attendees at the World Health Assembly to be better prepared for what will be a very exciting week and a half ahead. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much, John, and you will have seen the program, of course. I've been asked to say a couple of words why this year, 2017, is a crucial year for global health. You will then have a short introduction by Gianluca Burci, who is here at the Institute now, formerly WHO, on the World Health Assembly procedures and governance. Then we're going to have a panel discussions to discuss stakeholder preparations for World Health Assembly, which John will chair. And then we will have a sort of tour d'horizon of some of the issues, priority issues that are being discussed at the Assembly. A number of WHO colleagues have kindly agreed on this very busy day for them, to spend some time here with us, to brief us, and I'll be chairing that, and we hope to end by around 6 o'clock. So I think as we prepare for this World Health Assembly, it is also important to say, what are those larger things happening out there? What is happening this year, or has already happened for that matter, that is also influencing the debates at the World Health Assembly and will be very determining for global health? And many of those things that are out there, that have already happened or will happen, are clearly political. And even the first point on our agenda, what's one of the most important things happening for global health this year, the election of the Director General, is of course an inherently deep political event and political process. And many of you have been engaged in it in one way or the other. And it was interesting to see a tweet from a very prominent global health person, I think yesterday, who actually said, which election this year is even more important than the American election, the French election, or whatever? And he was of the opinion, it's the election for the custodian of our global health. It's the Director General. And I think we all feel this because health is such an inherently political choice that many of us feel it needs the commitment of high-level political bodies also to take it forward. Of course, there's been a strong political message also from the process of the election of the Director General. John already alluded to it. It is indeed a much more transparent process. It's also a much more lively process, and like all political elections, it's sometimes gotten a little out of hand, I would say. But that's the price you pay. Either you open up and then you have these kinds of debates, or you stay closed. And many of us would hope that this process influences other appointments, elections, C-elections in the global health arena, especially the Global Fund for AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, for example. So WHO, that's always criticized to be behind the times, actually spearheaded something here that can be very, very important. Another first that has just happened, and I was very happy to be engaged with that process, is the very first ever G20 meeting of health ministers. It just closed in Berlin yesterday. There is a Berlin declaration of the G20 health ministers that I would ask you to look at. And there are two very important things here. Of course, the G20 meet to discuss. They express political support. It is not a pledging conference or something like that. But it was interesting that if you look at the declaration, there is a strong expression of political support, as a political body should do, for those existing initiatives in global health, including very strong statements of support to WHO as the lead organization in global health. And I think it's important that political bodies express this clearly and hopefully also act in that manner. That's also true for other political bodies, and you will see at the Assembly that the BRICS countries are getting much more engaged. They will be holding a number of events also. And we see that this kind of political engagement for health is very important, and we will need to look at it and analyze it without a wrong kind of politicization of health. We need that health on the political agenda, but we don't want health politicized in the wrong manner, and that's something that's a very, very difficult balancing act. Another very critical thing this year will be the interface of health and the SDGs. Health, of course, is SDG 3, and it has been selected to be part of the in-depth SDG review that is taking place over this summer. And we should look very carefully how that review takes place and whether it reflects the spirit of the SDGs and reflects the approach to the social determinants of health and many others. And it will also help define something we don't quite know yet, that is, how strong is the support of the new Secretary General to the global health agenda. He clearly has a very strong humanitarian agenda, and obviously everything in that agenda is dependent on health and contributes to health. I'm not trying to separate things in a non-SDG way, but still I think we have to look carefully how health remains also high on the agenda within the UN. I personally think, as far as 2017 is concerned, a lot of health financing issues will be decided during this year. And we will set the stage with the budget discussions at WHO, whether there will be increased assessed contributions of the WHO budget, but also the preparations are already ongoing for next year for the replenishment years of Gavi and the Global Fund. And we are not sure, all of us, how well we will do in relation to global health funding. As you know, many people say we've sort of come out of a global age of global health, a really golden age, as some people call it, but we've seen it sort of stay flat over the last years. And the question is, with decisions that possibly the new Trump administration will take in the United States, then this might mean significantly less money in global health. That in turn is a challenge to many of the European donors. Will they sort of be willing to go further? We have elections in the countries of the major European donors. We have the UK election, the German election, we've just had the French election. We're not sure yet where those donors are going in relation to global health funding. But even more than the money per se, what we will be faced with this year and next is really to define differently in the SDG context the interrelationship between domestic funding, development funding for health, and funding for global public goods. And I feel very strongly that we're not there and that we're going to see a tremendous shift here that will influence also many of the goals that are set. Is 0.7 still the goal we're aiming for? Is 0.1 for health the right kind of goal we want? So how will this move forward? And how will it also influence perhaps that we need to build or are building new initiatives? You will, maybe in our panel, somebody will mention the She Decides initiative in order to balance out some of the other money. And finally, I believe one of the big things that we will need to be able to see in 2017 is if we're really better prepared for outbreaks. As we meet here, we have another Ebola outbreak. There have been reforms, not only in WHO, also elsewhere. And we will have to show whether the new mechanisms work and also then show how they will need to be financed. A couple of trend issues that I think we will need to keep in mind, I will just mention very shortly. We will have to, in global health, be much more concerned with people on the move in many, many different ways. We have an approach to global health which is still based on nation states and not on flows of people. And there is something conceptually, politically, and finance-wise that we will have to address there. And that's not only refugees. That's many kinds of population movements, mobility within countries, between countries, that are absolutely critical. We will need to have a much clearer understanding of the commercial determinants of health, both positive and negative. And the NCD discussion next year, 2018, at the UN, will be one of the markers of that. But also we will need to have a much better understanding of the growth of the health industry and what today is a health industry, because the information industry is a health industry. Much of the technology industry is a health industry, using drones for health and all kinds of things. So we need a new understanding here and a new macroeconomics that will be very important. Part of that is what has just happened last week. How prepared are we for cybercrime in global health? Another challenge that we will need to start taking up. And then I'd like to mention 3 backlashes that we really need to deal with. The backlash on gender issues, in every sense of the word, the backlash on evidence. Global health lives off, builds on evidence. If our evidence is not accepted, what do we do? And very seriously, the backlash on humanitarianism and humanitarian conventions. And this loss of respect for human life, this loss of respect for those who serve for health in very difficult humanitarian situations, in war situations, refugee situations, is perhaps one of the most worrying trends we have in the global community right now. So those are some of the points we'd like to leave with you as we go through the World Health Assembly and its agenda. Those things don't go away. They'll probably even get more important. And I at least personally hope that whoever is the new Director General of WHO will show a willingness to tackle these issues and to take us forward into the 21st century in global health. Thank you very much. Oops. I get out my program. And I have Gianluca now. Gianluca Burci will introduce you to the WHA procedures and governance. He's now a professor with us here at the Institute, and of course was the former legal counsel of the World Health Organization. So if anyone should know it, it's him. Gianluca.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Can somebody help me to put the slides on the screen, please? So I don't make any disaster. And how do I move this?
You have your clicker here.
Okay.
It's there, and he will change it, and you just click through.
Okay. But I don't see it on the screen.
He's going to change it in a moment.
Yeah, can you put the first slide, please? Okay, while technology runs its course, let me start right away. I have about 15 minutes, so I'm not going to make too many introductions. I would like to give you some of the highlights of what you're going to see if you go to the Palais next week. In particular, it's a challenge, I think, for small delegation. It's a challenge for newcomers because it's a very packed week. It's the shortest assembly of the UN cycle, probably, with always a very big agenda. So things are hectic, many parallel meetings, many things happening at the same time, people running around, can be a bit confusing. So I think it's useful to give you some highlights of what you're going to expect and to break it down a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to touch these points. Let's start with the first one. Who participates? Who will be at the Palais next week? First of all, I'm not going to go in details, but just to give you a sense of who is there and what they can do. Obviously, member states are at the center of the action, 194. They need credentials, so there is a credentials committee that look at the credentials of delegates. Normally it's a fairly boring thing, except when you have issues like an election of the Director General. That I think it's very important. There is no doubt that everybody can vote, and there is no doubt on the legitimacy of the process, like this year. The second category is intergovernmental organizations, starting with the United Nations. WHO is a specialized agencies of the UN. We have many other IGOs that are in relations with WHO, nothing particular there. The third is Palestine. Palestine has been invited since the 1970s. It has special rights of participation. For example, it can speak together with member states under the item on health assistance to Palestinians in the occupied territory. And the other group is observers. You will see there's a mixed bag, for example, the two Red Cross organizations or the Interparliamentary Union. These have been invited in the course of time by the Director General under his or her authority. So they sit there, they can take the floor after member states, they can bring different perspectives to the work of the Assembly. Then obviously the public and the media, a very important presence, even though there are so many people that now we have to take measures to have them go into overflow rooms, and obviously there is a webcast for you to know, so many people actually watch it on the web. And that brings also quite a difference, because delegates are aware that what they say can be watched by anybody around the world. So I think there is a more of sense of perspective and responsibility. Finally, I left it last but not the least. You may remember, some of you may remember, that the Assembly last year adopted a framework of engagement with non-state actors. We call it FENSA, which is the first comprehensive policy within the UN system on how WHO engages with a number of categories of non-state actors. And this has changed also the rules for participating in our governing bodies. Before we had only NGOs. There was like a big inchoate category. Now we have three categories. One is NGOs that are actually more, if you want, the public service NGO or professional association. But then we have international business association, like IFPMA, for example, one of the main representatives of the pharmaceutical industry. Used to be labeled NGOs, now they have different labels, but the same rights of participation. And finally, and this is something new, philanthropic foundations. For the Gates Foundation is the first philanthropic foundation to be admitted in official relations, so they will participate officially in this forthcoming Health Assembly. WHO is the first organization of the UN system to include also this very important set of actors in among its observers. Let's move to what is discussed. So now we see who are the participants. So what are people going to talk about next week? This obviously has to do with the agenda of the Health Assembly. Here also, in extreme synthesis, the agenda of the WHA is proposed by the board in January. It's a very important step. But the final approval, of course, is for the Assembly itself. There is a General Committee meeting of 35 member states meeting tomorrow morning that gives a final seal of approval to the agenda, then is adopted in plenary. So you look at the agenda and you try to understand why certain items are there, why certain others that are urgent are not there. There are three categories of items. The first is new items coming to this assembly for the first time. As far as I know, there is only one, but I stand corrected, on the management of chemicals. These normally are proposed by member state or the Director General. They come through the board, so the board already pre-digests them, recommends a resolution or a decision, and then they go to the Assembly. They are divided, if you look at the agenda, into 6 categories. The category used by WHO for its own planning, so to keep items that are similar, that are coherent together, not to scatter them along the week. The second, which is most of the brunt of the agenda, are what we call reporting requirements. These are items considered by the Assembly in the past. They come back because the Assembly has decided that the Director General should report at certain intervals. And finally, progress reports. This seems like boring stuff. It's for information only, but they're very important items, and member states are very keen to discuss them. So don't think that they are something discussed in 5 minutes. They take the time. They're quite important for many member states. Here is one of the issues discussed in the last few years in governance reform, because you have a very big agenda in a very short span of time. There has been a lot of effort to try to streamline it, rationalize it, reduce the item, make the assembly more strategic, more focused. But obviously, there is also the counter trend. The states want to retain the freedom to discuss what they want when it's a priority at the national level. So it's still a work in progress there. But I think that many improvements have been made. Okay, so next step, how does the WHA work? What happens next week? How is the work done? Once again, as I said before, there's a lot of hecticness throughout the week. And sometimes it's frustrating because you think something is discussed in room 1, and then you go there, it's not discussed, where is it discussed, and so on. So the Secretariat has made a big contribution by preparing a WHA app. So if you have a smartphone, you can download it, and you have in real time what is discussed and where. That is terribly important for small delegations that don't have time to waste. There are very few people. And so download it and use it. I think it does make a difference. First of all, who are the officers? Who conducts the work? As you know, as you may know, in the UN system, things are done very much on a regional basis. WHO has 6 regions, is divided into 6 regions, so every region gets a bit of a bite at the apple. So the assembly has 1 president, for example, and 5 vice presidents. All the regions are represented. And the main committees, Committee A and B, we'll see in a moment, have 1 chair, 2 vice chairs, and the rapporteur. So they alternate in conducting the work. The important thing is, so what is the assembly composed of? What are all the bodies that do the work? The plenary, which is the most solemn thing, it will open tomorrow morning at 10, is normally reserved for a general debate, so countries, in particular ministers, take the floor. But there's not much action there. There will be action this week because of the election of the Director General, but it normally adopts the resolutions at the very end. It's a more solemn, more formalistic kind of meeting. Credentials Committee, I talked about it. General Committee meets tomorrow and Wednesday. It looks at the agenda, organizes work, moves items between Committee A and Committee B, proposes the members of the Executive Board to elect for the next 3 years. So it's normally fairly sort of not boring, but regular, except when there are contested items. Then it can be very, very difficult because what is recommended there obviously has a bearing what happens in the Assembly. The main job is done in Committee A and Committee B. Committee A is programmatic and technical, including the budget. So it will have a lot of work in looking at the final project of the budget. Committee B is administrative, financial, legal, for example, relations with the UN, other international organizations, as well as a Palestinian item. It's always discussed in Committee B. Committee A is very busy, and so sometimes items are shifted from Committee A to Committee B. And once again, if you don't know and you sit there waiting for your item to come and then realize it's moved to B, it's very frustrating. So the WHA app is really very helpful in these regards. A lot of what happens outside the meeting room. There are many informal consultations, there are many drafting groups, there are many groups of delegates that huddles at the Serpent Cafe and try to sort out issues with the resolution, decisions, and so on. So there's a lot of side action, which sometimes is as important as what happens in the meetings room. And then, as I put at the bottom of the slide, the WHA has become the Global Health Week. There's a lot of meetings, a lot of action surrounding the Health Assembly. That's very important. It means that the Assembly has a lot of attraction on what happens in global health governance. But at the same time, can be a bit distracting. If you have multiple meetings that you want to attend, more or less in parallel, and in particular if you have a small delegation. But it's exciting how much this week is attracting in political terms. How decisions are taken? I'm coming almost to the end. One of the reforms has been to avoid tactical surprises. In the past, delegations sometimes came with resolutions on Wednesday, on Thursday, that can be very destabilizing politically because it's sort of all the balls go in the air. Now, if you have a resolution, you have until Monday evening to introduce it. No surprises. And that, in a way, I think sets the tone for the rest of the week. Obviously, the purpose of the Assembly is first to allow discussion, but also to take actions in the form of decisions, of resolutions. These are discussed in the main committees, But then often there are amendments, and it's unwieldy to discuss them in a room with 180 people, 180 countries, so they're moved to drafting groups, or they sometimes are discussed on the side. So there are 2 parallel formal meetings at any given time, but there can be 6 meetings in informal groups. Once again, it's a challenge for small delegation. And that's why sometimes regional positions are very important. You can delegate to another member of your region what your position will be. Then the most process part, resolutions or decisions are adopted in the main committees, they're sent to the plenary and adopted towards the end of the session. WHO has a very strong ethos of consensus. Voting, formal voting, where you raise your hands and you vote yes or no, are the absolute exception. Voting is considered a defeat in WHO. And this, I think, is important because it gives a lot of importance to negotiation. You want to have a result that is acceptable to everybody. And everybody is very invested in the result of negotiation. So that's why it's so intense. Normally, there's always a vote for election, so we'll have a vote, as I will explain in a moment, for the election of the Director General, and traditionally there is a vote, a recorded vote, that takes quite a while, on the item on Palestine, because there's not an agreement, obviously, among the various parties, and it's basically impossible to reach consensus until now. Final point, election of the Director General. Of course, it's on everybody's mind, like Ilona said, it's a very, very important step. The process has been revised thoroughly in the last few years. As Ilona said, the WHO is way ahead of the game in terms of transparency and robustness of the process. Candidates have been subjected to multiple town hall meetings and interviews. I think it's an exception, and it talks a lot about the openness of this process. I think we can be proud of it. Of course, I won't have the time to go into details, but just to give you a sense what will happen at this assembly. First of all, the election is on Tuesday afternoon. For the first time, we have 3 candidates, not 1. And so the WHA will actually have a decision. And so the WHA will decide by secret ballot. There was an attempt to introduce electronic vote to speed things up, but it didn't work. And so it will go back to old-fashioned ballot cast in a box. So it can last into the evening, into the night, adding to the drama of what can happen. I participated in the reform. The legal council was in the middle of the action. So one of the challenges was the majorities, because the majorities can be decisive in who gets elected. And so there will be a sliding set of majorities, starting from 2/3, then moving to an absolute majority of the members, i.e. 98, and then moving down to a simple majority. So from 3 candidates, you whittle down to 2, and then you keep voting until you have either 2/3 majority or an absolute or a simple majority. So you can understand that it can last for quite a while. And so don't bite your nails too much, because it can be well into the evenings. And the process will be reviewed in 2018. I hope that it will be confirmed and validated, because I think it's been a very robust, very transparent process. I don't think I have time for questions, right? Or I do? No, okay. Okay. I'll be available later if you want to ask questions. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Gianluca. And I'm sorry we didn't have time for questions. Next, we'll have a panel discussion on the stakeholder preparations for the World Health Assembly. If the panel could please come up and take your seats. What we're doing at this session is, since this is really a briefing for delegates, including new delegates, we wanted to give you a sense of the different approaches to the World Health Assembly. You saw from Gianluca how the attendees at the World Health Assembly include the official delegates, but include many others, including the groups under the new Framework of Engagement for Non-State Actors, or FENSA. So what we have here, and I won't repeat their biographies because you've already been able to receive that at the entrance. What we have here is a representative of a Ministry of Health, a representative from a private sector association, a representative from a civil society organization focused on gender equality and global health, and a representative of a student organization. So we wanted to give you those different kinds of perspectives on how to prepare for the World Health Assembly that's beginning tomorrow. We'd like to begin this discussion then with Warissa Panichikriangri. And I speak a few languages, but not Thai, so I'm not sure I got that one right. But anyway, please go ahead, Marissa.
Okay, thank you very much, and sawadee ka. And thank you for this great opportunity for Thailand to share our experience. For Thailand, we see the WHA is one of the great platform in terms of global health. It's just not only about moving global health agenda for the benefit of mankind, but also the broadening views of on global health of our colleagues who are from both health and non-health. So this comes to the idea that Thai delegates would comprise of representatives from various agencies. For within the ministry, delegates are from different departments: Department of Health, Department of Disease Control, Department of Mental Health, but also Bureau of International Health and other research units, such as IHPP or International Health Policy Program or HITAP or Health Technology Assessment. Other agencies outside the ministry also include the Thai Health Promotion Foundation, who works on health promotion, the National Health Security Office, who manage the Universal Coverage Scheme. This is for 47 million of Thai population. We also include the media or the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So this is not only the combination of delegates from different agencies, but we do concern the well balance between new delegates and those experienced delegates. And importantly, the financial support is by their own agency, as we can see that this is part of the capacity building. So each year you might observe that Thai team is quite a huge team. This year is around 53 something. So how to put everyone on the same page. This comes to the preparatory phase. We have quite different activities. The first activities will focus more on the novice or those who never attended the WHA. So we convene a global health diplomacy workshop. This is to provide basic information of the global health, such as global health landscape, global health agenda, and as well as what is the WHA and what are the roles at the WHA. So we focus more on the practice. One of our assignments are let them write the interventions or form national stands. And for the past couple of years, we also extend our participants to other countries. For example, Japan, Vietnam, Fiji, Malaysia, or Philippines. And this would allow us to share views on global health with others. Another type of activity is preparatory meetings for all Thai delegates. So we convene a couple rounds of meetings. The first meeting is to allocate agenda and also set up timeline in developing a national position of each agenda. Then each responsible person of that agenda has to do some research, study all the pile of documents, as you can see, there are lots of things to read, and also consult the relevant stakeholders, which include interdepartmental or ministerial consultation, as well as relevant civil society. Then another preparatory meeting is to update the agenda and form national position. This is under the supervision of our Deputy Secretary General of the Ministry of Public Health, and also our global health experts, such as Dr. Suwit, Dr. Viroj, who some of you might be familiar with. And apart from preparation in the country or in Thailand, the Southeast Asia region also convenes a regional briefing. This is to update agenda, and also we, among the SEER member states, we agree upon the agenda to be regional one voice. Usually one country is responsible for one ROV or regional one voice. So each, the WHA for SEER, we will have around 11 regional one voice. And during the WHA, Thai team also have a daily briefing. So sorry, we do apologize if we occupy some part of the serpent bar in the morning. And this is to update the agenda and walk through the agenda, what will happen on that day, and also update the agenda that had been happened yesterday, and learn from the side meetings, because we also allocate the side meetings to our delegates. So throughout the preparation phase and during the WHA, we see that the WHA would extend our network, not only international ones, but also the network within the country, such as during the stakeholder meetings, during the consultative meetings, and also among Thai delegates that we work together and we live together in Geneva. So, and this was strong network that lead to a good collaboration in the area of global health in Thailand. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Larissa. Thailand always has one of the largest and one of the best prepared delegations here, and I think you just heard a very good explanation of why they're so well prepared, because of all the serious approach that they take to it. Next, we'd like to hear from Rupa Dutt, who will give us the perspective from her organization, Women in Global Health.
Good afternoon, everyone. So one of the things, Women in Global Health, we're a newly found movement, founded in 2015. We're working on bringing greater gender equality to the global health, and being at the World Health Assembly is one place that we really feel we can have great influence, and we use a multi-stakeholder approach. One of the things that we were able to begin in October together with the Graduate Institute is hosting strategy meetings where we work with member states, civil society, different academic actors, and really think about how can we come most prepared, particularly for WHA, and work with global health leaders. So for this particular World Health Assembly, one of the really exciting things we've done is in January at the executive board meeting, we launched a call to action for greater gender equality. And we've been very fortunate that some of the member state countries have been able to advance this and have made it their issue, particularly Colombia, Sweden, and the United Kingdom. And then thinking a little bit more about how does the WHA work, as you have heard in the presentation before, there's many different ways that civil society and multi-stakeholder dialogues take place. So particularly what's really exciting for Women in Global Health is last year we had a Women Leaders Dinner, and this year we're going to be celebrating 13 heroines of health with a gala bringing together over 40 global health leaders to really talk about how to advance gender equality. So some of these informal meetings that take place simultaneously to WHA is a great place to build momentum, to build community. Many of the organizations put these type of events on. We also will be participating in having a side event which talks about maternal neonatal child health and women's leadership in that space, as well as having our meet and greet as another place. And just closely following some of the agenda items, one of the big things is that gender is cross-cutting. It applies to every health issue. So we try to encourage every delegate to think about applying the gender lens. And then finally, a place for actually everyone in this room to really think about is how can all of you advance gender equality? We've launched a call for commitments from individual global health leaders, and as all of you in this room can think about the ways that you can advance, there's 5 simple things. One is that all of us can bring visibility to women's contributions. They're unrecognized, underpaid. We know this as a fact, and this is something that we all can take a responsibility for. The second aspect is really thinking about closing the gender data gap. There are many researchers, academics that are attending this, many foundations, governments that have this data, so thinking about how can you close the gender data gap. The third area is thinking about the policy. Like there's policies that we're all going to be thinking about, and thinking about if there's a gender lens to that. Fourth aspect is also placing an aspect of we all can be mentors and sponsors for women, and we as men and women can be sponsors for this. So these are call to commitments, and there's also a pledge for continuing to have more gender parity. So I encourage all of you to engage with women in global health and think about advancing gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rupa. And one of the things she pointed out, of course, in addition to the fundamental issue of gender equality in global health, is how many side events there are on those issues and many more. And that's one of the beauties of being here at the World Health Assembly. It's not just the official gatherings, but the official side events that are held in the Palais des Nations and the unofficial ones that are held elsewhere. I also found it interesting that you talked about your strategy meetings with both member states and civil society in advance of WHA, which is one way of approaching this to be better prepared and to have the member states engaged. Next, we'd like to hear from Grega Kumer, who's the head of the DG Office in Legal Issues in the International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations. Grega?
Good afternoon, and thank you, Ambassador. It is a bit unusual to be here on such a beautiful sunny Sunday, but I'm in a great company of my panelists, and thank you for inviting us. First of all, I'd like to pass the regards from our Director General, who is unfortunately unable to join us today. He's in an important meeting outside of Geneva, but also related to WHA. Secondly, let me just start by saying, so my name is Grega Kumer, and I'm here on behalf of the IFPMA, that's International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations. I know it's a bit long name, but we have a very straightforward mission. We represent more than 30 R&D pharmaceutical companies and around 50 national and regional pharmaceutical associations. We are based here in Geneva, and we have been cooperating with many Geneva-based organizations for almost 50 years. So we can say we are really truly global representatives of the industry. We are also committed to discover, develop, and deliver medicines and participate constructively in discussions around global health challenges, with bringing innovative solutions on the table. We're very glad that we've been taking into account the role of the industry in finding solutions in global health. We're very glad to be recognized as one of the key WHO stakeholders, and not only by WHO, but also by other organizations such as the Graduate Institute. And I'm really looking forward to working with you closely as well in the future. I was asked to say a few things about the preparations of the industry and as well the role and the importance of the Health Assembly for our industry. So I would say it's a threefold thing. First, it's a platform to discuss the main global challenges that are surrounding us. Secondly, it's a place to meet. And thirdly, it's a place to showcase. In terms of substance, we do as well follow very closely all the substantive agenda items. We always analyze thoroughly all the documents that are prepared for the meetings. As I said, we do represent a big number of companies and associations, so we then coordinate. That our role is to coordinate. So we go through all the papers, and through our internal mechanisms, we discuss and we try to foster sort of general understanding on these topics, and as well work on joint position on all these issues. We are also always very interested in the views of other stakeholders, so we're always willing and available for anybody who wants to enter in a constructive discussion with us. So, and that doesn't apply only prior to the assembly, but also during and after. So that might be as well as a call for all of you that have interest in reaching out to the industry, that we are here and we're always willing to listen to your views. Secondly, it is a great place to meet. It's probably, if not the most important event on the health issues of the year, among the most important ones. So it brings together a lot of important actors from all around the world that deal with global health issues. So for us, this is a great opportunity to build new relationships, but also to strengthen existing cooperations with those that are actually not based in Geneva. And then thirdly, It's a place to showcase. Many of you are aware that at the margins of WHA and as well during the WHA, there is a lot of events taking place. I've seen the latest list of side events, and maybe it's a bit too long, even for logistical and organizational reasons, as it has been highlighted as well before. But in any case, we find it as an excellent opportunity, at least for our industry and our companies and associations, to showcase the great work that they've been doing throughout the year, all to demonstrate and present all the projects and initiatives that have been launched. But not only from our side to present our work, but it's also interesting to attend other events to get the latest updates from other stakeholders, what they've been up to, and hear their sort of experience and share best practices. And so in that sense, we find it very important. There are really a lot of events that take place that are hosted by our members or either companies or associations, but I'll flag just 3 that are IFPMA branded. So the first one that takes place on Tuesday is on biotherapeutics in the next 70 years. So we host this one in cooperation with IAPO, that's International Alliance of Patients Organizations. So basically the event will take a look from the patient side of issues, and there will be as well experts on rare diseases, cancer, and others. So you're all very welcome to attend our events. I extend our warm invitation to all of you. The second event, it's taking place on Thursday at noon, noon. It's an event on partnerships and SDGs. It's called Accelerating Access to NCD Care. It's a great opportunity to learn a bit more of one of the latest initiatives launched by a big group of companies and others this year in Davos. It really brings very important players to tackle the issue of NCDs. There'll be speakers from World Bank, UICC, from industry, including our Director General and others, so I hope to see you all there. And the third event is our flagship event for this year, and that's event on immunization and healthy aging. So that one takes place on Thursday in the evening. So I will leave here some invitations for all of you who are interested. So there will be an interesting discussions on the topic. So all of you who deal with that issue, I think it's a must event. So warmly welcome again. And with that, I will just say thank you for the invitation, and we can only wish a successful 70th World Health Assembly, and hope to see you as well at our side events. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Grega. And it's an impressive group, array of events that your membership is organizing or attending. It was also interesting to hear you discuss how the WHA is a platform and a place to meet and is a showcase, and I think that's true in all 3 cases. Now we'd like to get a student perspective, and we have with us Marie Hauerslev, who's the Vice President for External Affairs at the International Federation of Medical Students Associations. Please.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you as well to the Graduate Institute for inviting us here today. We really appreciate the emphasis on youth and having a young person, on the panel today. So I've been asked to talk about why the WHA is important to us, and really I think there are 3 things. So first of all, to mobilize young leaders, to advocate, and to build and strengthen the partnerships that we already have. So regarding mobilizing young leaders, IFMSA represents 1.3 million medical students all over the world, and most of these work at the local level. But bringing them to the WHA gives them and us an opportunity to expose them to the global level and see what is going on at the global agenda that they can bring back to their countries and the local and national context. And how do we prepare our delegates? So what we do is that together with the Graduate Institute again, we organize a 4-day capacity building workshop where we're focusing on some of the global health diplomacy skills and also some of the most important topics for us in the upcoming assembly. And going into what are the most important areas for us at this World Health Assembly also touches on what is the advocacy that we're going to do. And first of all, we're going to work on migrant health. So for us, that means people on the move, that they also have the right to the highest attainable standard of health. Secondly, adolescent health, a generation that has been neglected through many of the last few decades. Health-wise, we haven't seen the same kind of health improvements in outcomes. And also, adolescence is obviously an age group that's very close to us, so therefore it's also important for us. And then NCDs, of course, the biggest killer of them all. And what we're specifically focusing on is that actually 70% of the premature deaths due to NCDs are caused by risk factors that started in adolescence. And then lastly, also human resources for health, of course. As doctors in training, we are exposed to health systems that are not meeting the needs of the populations. And also we're seeing doctors working in unfair conditions, and also some of our colleagues in conflict situations are actually under attack. But of course we have all of these ambitions, but we realize that we cannot achieve anything on our own. And that leads me to the point about partnerships. So as been said a few times, partnerships and this WHA is a unique opportunity to meet everyone basically who works in global health. So we also use this opportunity to meet with our partners, strengthen our partnerships, see what things do we want to work on in the future. And we also get inspired by the different events and the things that the WHO is putting on the agenda. I wanted to bring forward an example of a good partnership between us as a youth organization and another institution. And what we did, as I said, we're really concerned about NCDs. And also we really want to be involved in the lead up to the high-level meeting in the UN in 2018. So what we did was we partnered with the WHO Global Coordination Mechanism for NCDs, and we organized a youth NCD caucus in Montenegro. And parts of this was attended by more than 800 medical students. After debates and dialogues and so on, we adopted a WHA Youth Declaration, a call to action on NCDs. And some of the findings there are actually quite interesting. So I wanted to highlight that 75% of our 128 national member organizations do not find that their medical education prepares them well enough to tackle prevention, taking into account also social determinants of health when they're treating patients with NCDs. So 75% are actually not educated to be ready to respond effectively to NCDs. And going into how youth participation can work and what we want, I really think that if we find joint interests on some matters, then we can find ways where, of course, young people, I know I work with them every day, and there's lots of them sitting up here. They are bright, they're well educated, they're driven and innovative, and also we grew up with technology, so that can also be used. And then I think we really want to be involved both from idea or identification of the problems into the policy creation and also into the implementation of policies. And at all levels of society, I know medical students and other young people that are interested in being engaged. So as Ban Ki-moon said, young people are the world's greatest untapped resource. And if you are a country delegate, I'd like you to think about whether you could have whether your country should have a youth delegate, or if you're working in policy making, whether you could include more young people in the health policy creation. And lastly, I'd just like to say that if you need any inspiration or more background on what we're working on, they're spread out a little bit, but we have more than 50 delegates at the World Health Assembly, so feel free to talk to any of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie, and I particularly appreciated your discussion of how your roles mobilizing young leaders, advocating and building and strengthening partnerships. Certainly, the advocating and the partnerships is something that involves almost everyone in this room in one way or another. I think that one of the takeaways from this discussion is how interconnected the world of global health is. You have the World Health Organization as the guardian of public health around the globe, but WHO Secretariat cannot do it alone. It really partners with just about everyone in this room in one way or another. And what I found interesting to hear from the four panelists was how their organizations take this coming week so seriously in advance of the week by engaging in the various partnerships, whether it's through member state delegations that may engage with other member states, whether it's civil society organizations or international business associations or student associations that engage with member states, with others in the non-state actor sector, etc. It's really a rich discussion we've just had to try to give you a sense of how complex this is and how there will be so many people from so many different perspectives attending the World Health Assembly in the next week and a half. With that, we'd like to conclude this panel, and I'd like to turn it over to Ilona. Thank you.
Well, that was a real youth panel in itself, I think, if you looked at the representatives from all of the groups, and we're very happy about that, and particularly to work as much as we can with a new generation in global health and hear from them and involve them and also have them working together. We've now got a whole series of colleagues from the WHO who have agreed to come and talk with us. My plan is to ask them to come up here in two groups, to have them give short presentations and then also give the opportunity for a couple of short questions from the audience, because there might be one or two important things that you would need for your briefing. Ian Smith from the WHO, the Executive Director of the Director General's Office, will join us at 5, so we will discuss the budget then. And I would ask Suzanne Hill, Peter Graf, and Santino Severoni to come up, please, and take your seats. And maybe Francesco, if you can... No, you stay there for now. Okay, let's do it step by step. Do any of you have slides?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So maybe because we've already spoken about people on the move, to not lose much time, let's get Santino to move, and let's start the discussions, please.
Thank you, Ilona. Good afternoon to everybody. While the presentation is going to be displayed, just to bring you the regards of the regional director that was invited today for this session, and unfortunately she cannot be with us because of the commitment for the preparation of the assembly. Yeah. So I will give you a very short briefing on the item 13.7 within the health system issue discussion committee A of next week. The global framework and the resolution that will be submitted next week to the Assembly are actually the response to the growing attention to a very complex situation which is interesting many countries around the world, regions, and confronting governments and health sector with an unprecedented situation. I'm not going into details. You can see a few numbers to give you an idea, a census of the complexity and the size of the issue. But what is important is that too often we are talking about people on the move, refugees and migrants, because of crisis situation or responsible to be at the starting of a crisis themselves. Well, it's not exactly like that. In reality, the people moving because of crisis are a very small number to compare of the global situation, and people moving for other reasons. And this is an important element to consider, that when we are thinking and addressing public health aspects related to migration, refugees health, we need to consider and think short-term interventions, but long-term also, because this is a phenomenon that we're going to observe for the years to come. A lot has been done so far. Many countries have been placing the issue on top of their own political agenda. The topic was brought up in the past World Health Assembly, in the past Executive Board, and the last one in January have been requesting concrete steps, concrete actions by the Secretariat, and exactly the production of a global framework for this year, then regional situation analysis for the next year, and a global action plan for the 2019. This is a precious opportunity, actually, because for the first time we are having a sustained commitment and attention to a very complex, sometimes politically labeled issue, influencing the response and the action of the health sector. The paper that will be presented, submitted to the Assembly next week, is the result of very intense consultation and discussion among member states. It's an unfinished work because the Secretariat will request a drafting group to allow member states to still have a chance to refine the paper, which will be in discussion later in the next week. What is the concept behind this paper? Probably many of you know that in 2008 there was already a resolution, mainly looking at the setting the principle to really inspire an health system which is able to capture the needs, health needs posed by migrant population. The situation is completely changed, I would say, since 2008. Almost 10 years passed, and the situation also very complex and very articulated. And in terms of numbers, probably we are confronting ourselves with a demographic change, telling us that we cannot allow anymore to talk about health of migrants and health of refugees separated from the public health discourse or global health discourse. This is not an issue, although it's affecting primarily certain countries. This is not an issue which can be addressed by a single country, but require a collaboration, inter-country action. And actually there is a lot going on the ground where we can learn in terms of good practices and experiences. And the overall objective of this global framework resolution is really to promote strong public health arguments. We are not bringing up a paper to open up the discussion related to the political dimension, which is there, but really we want to offer an instrument to support member states and to guide member states to address major public health concerns. The global framework has been heavily inspired by the existing framework and policies. You can see here the most important. All of them are reflected in the document which will be submitted, starting from the Assembly, the World Health Assembly resolution of 6117 to the conclusion of the consultation in Madrid and Colombo recently, the SDG agenda, but also the existing regional policy papers. Yes, because what had happened is that at the regional level, responding to local needs and demands of action, some regions, they loaded themselves already of a policy framework, of a policy paper. So there is a gap now at the global level. It's important that we're going to position ourselves also on the global dimension of public health aspect of refugees' health and migrant health. Let's go in details to the paper that will be submitted to the next week. Resolution is a short, very straightforward resolution, having a very precise aim, explaining that the current paper, it's planning to offer instruments, tools to the member states to also engage actively in contributing facts to the global compact drafting on refugees and migration, which is taking place in parallel, to support member states in national policy development and identifying best practices in order to strengthen capacity worldwide. This is the global framework. It's divided into two papers, a report with a thoughtful description of the background situation and a guiding principle, and then the global framework itself with a priority area of action and commitment of the Secretariat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Keep some of your questions until we've heard the other papers as well. And what's important for me to say is what you heard from Santino. First of all, he represents the European region, so we don't only have the voices of WHO headquarters here, but also he indicated that in some cases, regions have developed policy frameworks because they have been particularly pressured by an issue. Think of the Eastern Mediterranean region, think of the European region now in relation to migrants and refugee health. And it's really the time for things to come together globally. And that's a very, very important step that member states are discussing right now. We're going to move on, and I would like Suzanne Hill, please, to take the floor. She's the Director of Essential Medicines and Health Products Department at the headquarters in this case, and she'll speak to us about what's on the agenda in relation to access to medicines, which of course every year is actually getting to be a more and more important issue on the World Health Assembly. Please, Suzanne.
Thank you and good afternoon. I don't have slides, so I'll sit here and talk comfortably. There are at least 6 items on the agenda for the World Health Assembly this year that touch on aspects of access to medicines, which illustrates its importance to our member states. I think before I go into the details of the items very briefly, and I'm sorry, I'm not including the discussion on antimicrobial resistance, which also has an angle with respect to access to antibiotics. So before I go into the various items that are there and just talk briefly about the way the discussion may or may not go, I thought it would be worth emphasising how we need to think about access to medicines so that we don't get caught in particular angles or lines of rhetoric. Access to medicines, if you think about it, is really the end point is the patient having the medicine that they need in the right dose at the right time for the right duration, and it has to be of the right quality. So if you think about that end game, what you have to have is a system within health systems that actually can deliver medicines to patients, which means that you have to have research and development. You need to have manufacturing in place that needs to comply with quality standards. You need to have a regulatory authority existing that can actually manage the market for countries or for regions. You need to have a system in place that ensures that a selection process, if you're running an insurance system or under UHC, chooses the right medicine or the most cost-effective medicine to be made available. Then you need some sort of procurement and purchasing structure that makes sure that the quality products are actually made available to the country. You need prescribers who know what they're doing. You need a system of dispensing or providing products in the marketplace that means that you actually have a secured supply chain. And then you need the patient to actually get it. You also need systems of monitoring and governance in place because there's no point having a patient get the medicine and have a side effect if there's no way of closing the loop on the monitoring system and making adjustments. So we need to monitor for adverse effects, we need to monitor for appropriate use, and we also need to monitor for quality. I think one of the most challenging systems about access to medicines is that it needs all of these things to be aligned before we actually get delivery. So with that in mind, let's look at the items on the agenda and think about how they might relate. I'm going to come back to item 13.3 last, but if you start with 13.4 and 13.5, which are the evaluation and review of the global strategy and plan of action on public health, innovation and intellectual property, and the follow-up of the report of the Consultative Expert Working Group on Research and Development, particularly in relation to financing and coordination, you can see that there's going to be discussion around the very early inputs into the pharmaceutical value chain, if you like to think of it in that way. There's going to be debate about who pays for R&D. There's going to be debate about how the needs of low and middle income countries with respect to neglected diseases are met in innovation. If we then look at item 13.6, we have the member state mechanism on, take a deep breath here, substandard, spurious, falsely labelled, falsified, counterfeit medical products. The good news is that the point of this item is to request the Assembly's agreement to change that title. It's only going to be substandard and falsified. So we have to learn to say SF medicines instead of SSFFC medicines. This may sound like a trivial change, but what it represents is the result of something more than 5 years discussion and work and negotiation and consultation between member states on how to handle a problem that we see as an increasing issue for public health. Just to give you a sense of the scale of this, we have a reporting mechanism that's been set up about 3 years ago. And now roughly 120 countries have regulatory authorities who have been trained in reporting and identifying and responding to suspect products. We think we have something like 1,500 reports in our database at the present time, of which over half relate to antimicrobials and a third of that relate to antimalarials. So if you think about the problems of actually getting medicines, you've also got to think about how you secure your supply chain so you do not get diversion or you do not get entry of products that are actually not effective. The next couple of items relate to other aspects of access to medicines. 15.3 will be an interesting follow-up discussion to the UN General Assembly special session on the world drug problem. And the discussion there ranges around the challenges of ensuring access to opioids and appropriate pain medication, particularly, for example, in the context of managing palliative care. But at the same time, I think an increasing number of countries are having problems with inappropriate use and overuse of products such as oxycodone or fentanyl derivatives. So this whole question of balancing access with appropriate control, I think, is going to be discussed again. It's been discussed in the EB this year. It's been discussed at the Vienna session of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs earlier this year. And this will be a follow-up with, I believe, a decision supporting the Memorandum of Understanding that's been signed between the CND and WHO to take this work forward in collaboration. The next one is 15.6, which is cancer prevention and control in the context of an integrated approach. And I think this has been the subject of intense interest, shall we say, as the text has been developed in consultation by member states over the time since the Executive Board. As of, today is Sunday, right? Yeah. As of Friday, a consensus text was being prepared for submission as a conference paper. It's clearly a very important topic because this is the first time the WHO will have had a resolution on cancer to work with. But of course, as many of you are aware, there are really increasing concerns about access to medicines for cancer. Partially, this reflects problems with prices, but also it reflects problems with healthcare systems that have to have a very sophisticated and integrated approach to ensure that there's appropriate prevention, diagnosis, and delivery of treatment and care. So I think this issue of high-priced medicines is not going to go away. We've seen that 2 regions have already had resolutions or statements in their own regional committees. PAHO, I think, last year, and the European Regional Committee is working on a discussion for later this year in its regional committee because prices of medicines seem to be a problem everywhere. Which brings me back to item 13.3, which is addressing the global shortage of and access to medicines and vaccines. Again, many of you have followed this. This builds on the resolution last year from the WHA on problems with shortages of medicines and vaccines, which is a complex and growing concern in all countries, irrespective of income. What has been added into this following the discussion of the Executive Board is a broader review of the Secretariat's activities with respect to access to medicines, covering all of the aspects of that chain that I've described at the beginning. The UN High-Level Panel report on access to medicines is clearly a key interest in this area. And as you know well, the discussion of that amongst member states has been polarised. And I think we are all going to be waiting to see which way the discussion goes over the course of the coming week with respect to matters such as transparency of medicines prices, as well as things like R&D treaties, and of course the very delicate term delinkage. I'm happy to take questions, and I think, Ilona, I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. this is an excellent example, not only because the issue, of course, is so critical and crucial, and we also see that this is an issue which initially was looked at more from a perspective towards the developing countries, but now the issue of access to medicines, pricing, etc., just also think of Hep C and others, is an issue increasingly also in the developed world. And therefore, we are seeing new kinds of potential for coming together, but also coming apart. And the second thing why this is a good example is that the issue is reflected in so many different agenda items. And so, of course, when they are being negotiated, there are cross currents going on all the time, and which make negotiations more difficult, more exciting. I don't know how you want to look at it, but therefore it's not that easy to be able to agree on one if the other has not yet been agreed on, and vice versa. So you might want to think about that as well. We'll move to the third area, which is health emergencies, which of course particularly dominated last year's World Health Assembly. And there is much interest from member states what the progress is. And we'll hear an update on that now. Let me get the title totally correct from Peter Graf, who's Deputy Executive Director, Health Emergencies here at the WHO in Geneva. Peter, please.
Thank you, Ilona. And as you indicated, so the WHO Health Emergency Program was born last year during the Health Assembly. So it is you or your predecessors, your delegations, that are the godfathers and godmothers of this program. And it was the result of the real and perceived failings both within WHO, but also the larger global response to the Ebola outbreak, and let's say the ability of the world to respond to large disease outbreaks. And there were many involved in the reform process, the identification of these failings and the corrective measures. One of them sitting here on stage, Ilona. Right? So, as a program, so very briefly about the program, and then because it will come back during the assembly as well as one of the agenda items. So we were designed to be more operational, vertically integrated. So we have a program that actually cuts across the 3 levels of the organization as one entity, which is for WHO rather unique. So the head of the program, the executive director, Pete Salama, when something very, very serious happens, has actually the discretion to reallocate resources, including personnel from anywhere in the world, to address the problem without having to seek permission and negotiate within the house, be it at global or regional level. And the program is looking at sort of each element of the emergency management cycle: prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery. We have 5 departments established: one on infectious hazard management, one on country preparedness, which is dealing with IHR, for instance, one on health information and risk assessment, the emergency operations department, those 2 dealing with mitigation and response. And then on the recovery side, we work very closely with other parts of the house, such as health systems. And underpinning the effort, and this is an area for further discussion also during the assembly, are new departments within the program dealing with resource mobilization and management, dealing with emergency SOPs, the deployment of people, etc. Now, if we look at the World Health Assembly, if you thought that Sue had a lot of agenda items, so do we. I think we have about 10, of which the first 4 appear under 12.1, preparedness, surveillance and response. That's starting on Monday, tomorrow. In fact, if you look at our agenda items, most of them are front-loaded, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We only interrupted briefly by some sort of administrative event called the election. Yeah. Yeah. But preceding even this, given what has recently happened in DRC, there will be a briefing on the ongoing Ebola outbreak in DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I don't want to preempt that, and I think all of you should listen carefully. And if you can't, I have some handouts with me. But I think what you will hear is a very different story, a different setting, but also a different response, both from at a national level and in terms of the support coming in from outside than what the world faced in 2014. Then, going back to the agenda items proper, the first, and for the program as a new entity, arguably the most important one, is the report by what we call the Internal Oversight Advisory Committee, the IOAC, looking at document A78. This committee was set up to monitor the program and report on the rollout and full implementation of what we aspire to. And I think if in a nutshell, I think the report recognizes progress at country level, real case scenarios, alas. So last year has seen quite a number of problems all over the world. Northeast Nigeria, Yemen, Iraq, the large yellow fever and Zika outbreaks. But the report also recognizes that these gains are fragile and need to be supported in terms of building capacity at country level especially, to be able to prevent, detect and respond, as well as recover from emergencies. In addition, we need to continue to look at the administrative structures underpinning our responses, the ability to be fast and predictable. Now, in that first session, there will also be a report on WHO's response in severe large-scale emergencies. That's document A70/9. And this document describes our response to major emergencies. And so the report for 2016 is talking about 47 countries, including 32 acute graded emergencies and 19 protracted emergencies. Yeah, it's covering from Iraq and Syria on one extreme to Ebola and Zika on the other. It's really, it continues it shows sort of the amount of work that needs to be done, as well as the role that we as a WHO and as a secretariat need to play in this. But it really shows the pressure that just won't let up. The report highlights some successes, but also that, again, points out the need to increase our capacity, human capacity. Sorry, I have to... Yeah, okay, Ilona. Okay. More boots on the ground, better prepared to react. I still have a whole list of them. I mean, a report on research and development for potentially epidemic diseases. This is basically the aftermath of what was actually quite a successful effort dealing with a research and development agenda for Ebola. Because don't forget, when the disaster struck, there were no diagnostics, there was no treatment, there was no vaccine available. And how do you get the private sectors, the regulators, the academic institutions all together around a, let's say, a light version of requirements to quickly roll out new products, new processes, new means to be able to detect and respond. Last in this session is health workforce coordination. And this is to show, and I think I heard it already earlier, that of course we have a role to play as a secretariat, but given all these many emergencies that the world faces, the real work has to be done by a plethora of partners. So our role is often about getting them together, making sure that people know what has to be done, and make sure that this is done according to quality standards. And then under agenda item 12.4, we're talking about the implementation of the international health regulations. There's two agenda items under this, the annual report and the draft global implementation plan. And since Ilona is trying to tell me to be short, I will not go into detail. 12.5 is the review of the pandemic influenza preparedness framework. There's 36 recommendations that came out of a report, 2 of which are most likely to be quite significant also for discussion on the floor. One is a possible expansion of the PIP framework to include seasonal flu viruses, and the second one, the genetic sequence data being included in the PIP biological materials definition. And then finally, for agenda item 17, that's actually the next week, 2 progress reports, one on smallpox eradication and the other one on enhancement of laboratory biosafety. Then, to keep it light, we also have 3 dedicated exhibits. One is about the cluster system. So that will, throughout the World Health Assembly, allow you to engage with people in the field via Skype and learn from them what it's like to work on the ground. There's going to be a mini EOC, Emergency Operations Center, where a scenario will play out, a scenario very similar. In fact, the same material will be used that you, the last couple of days, facilitated in Berlin and used by the G20 health ministers. And then tomorrow only there will be an exhibit on attacks on health, where we will show you in a lively way. I mean, maybe that's the wrong way to use what has been happening of late when it comes to health and healthcare settings, being actually, instead of the provider of services, the receivers of attacks. And then there's a number of related side events I will quickly go through. Again, tomorrow attacks on health, tomorrow on international health regulations, tomorrow on CEPI, Tuesday on stronger health systems underpinning health security, and on Wednesday, polio's last stand. And then hopefully we can relax a bit afterwards.
Thank you. Well, Peter, I hope you survive the week. So, but again, it's an example, and I think that's also a trend within the World Health Assembly of, the clustering of different aspects of an issue. It's no longer that you can resolve the challenges at hand, ranging from research to operations to how WHO is governed, etc., within one agenda item, and it needs much more discussion, much more perspectives, and much more detail on each of them. And also, as you said, a new element that's emerging more and more, to really be able to illustrate, to be able to talk to people in the field, so also to organize the assembly in itself differently and in a more interactive manner. So there are a couple of minutes to ask some questions of our 3 WHO colleagues there. Can I see some hands, please? Yes, please, go ahead. Very short questions, please. We have these.
I am.
Just speak and it will come.
I am Dr. S.K. Satpathy. I am currently working as Director, School of Public Health, KIT University, Bhubaneswar, India. I am happy to be here, and thanks to all our panelists and others. They have given very good information. I have few questions. One is relation to the migration. As we all know, that health professionals' migration to the developed countries is a big problem. Not for the health of their professionals, but the impact they make on health of the people in their own countries. So whether it is a part of the discussions in this. Number 2, regarding that making available essential drugs is a very important issue. In that context, what is required is that more strategic and advocacy guidelines are required. That is because some of the countries, they need this guidance. One is that making that generic drugs, that is making more possible on the professionals to use that. And also the making a process, it has been rightly pointed out, that process is very important to make this availability of these drugs at the very close points to the people.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Could I have a question here, please? Trying to balance young and old, and male, female. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for this 2 amazing panels. I actually have questions to the access to medicines part. One question, yeah.
I want more people asking questions.
It's very straightforward. So for the item 13.3, would the inclusion of the United Nations High-Level Panel recommendations and the discussions of shortage for vaccinations medicine kind of dilute the focus on the recommendations of the United Nations high-level panel?
Okay, high-level panel. Patty here. And please introduce yourself, you forgot that.
Thanks very much. My name is Patty Rundle. I'm from the International Baby Food Action Network. I was intrigued with the, and a little bit worried of that WHO is moving towards being more operational, which to those of us who are very concerned about conflicts of interest and the whole issue that conflicts of interest have not been actually addressed yet in the framework for engagement of non-state actors. How is WHO going to protect itself when it becomes operational, and when in terms of actually, how it goes in and what products it uses, whether it uses a product-based approach rather than a preventive approach? How are member states going to have the right to own these things? Everything is being called an emergency now. So I really would like an answer of how you think you can really protect WHO from this multitude of partners that are now being opened up and called partners and stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you for these excellent questions. Let's start with Santino, please.
Yes, very short answer. Yes, it's also referring to this important argument, and it's bringing also in the issue of occupational health for healthcare workforce involved into migration process.
Thank you.
So responding to the question about advocacy for access to essential medicines, yes, that's clearly necessary, and we've just done the latest update of the WHO model list of essential medicines, which will be published in the first week of June. Generics policies are a core strategy that countries can use to manage medicines, but equally what we're seeing, and this goes to the shortage question, is that when we have generics, we don't always have sufficient functionality of the market to ensure supply. So this whole question of understanding market dynamics and why, when you have only one supplier of a generic product, such as we have with benzothine penicillin, it disappears, is becoming increasingly important. I think the other comment was the question of whether the high-level panel discussion will be diluted. I actually think it's going to take place over all 4 items. Because various aspects of the high-level panel recommendations, such as the R&D treaty, for example, are also covered in the GSPOA discussions and are also discussed under the CEWG when you look at research and development funds. So I suspect it's going to be, we're supposed to start on Thursday if you guys finish, Peter. So I think it's going to be fun for young and old on Thursday.
And a lot of weekend work, I guess. Peter, emergencies.
Yes, on emergencies. Well, first of all, I sincerely hope that with member states being better prepared, we actually over time will see fewer emergencies. So a lot of the work is about working, well, let's say, with member states in terms of their preparedness, within the House and with partners on health system strengthening, to ensure that let's say, prevention and mitigation and early action during events ensures that an event doesn't become an emergency. That is one. And then when it comes to partners, well, let's say FENSA does protect us in terms of who is allowed to work with us, as it were. And a lot of what we do is around setting the standards, guaranteeing the coordination. And in many cases, it's actually the national coordination structures that we support that would, let's say, allow the players, both national and international, to operate within a setting. So I'm sort of intrigued by your question because I don't feel I'm quite able to answer it. So either as a follow-up question now or perhaps afterwards bilaterally, I would love to take it on more. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead bilaterally then. Let's see how the other questions go. Okay, this lady here, the blonde lady, yes.
Thank you for your presentations. I would like to ask this question. Would the situation in Venezuela be addressed in terms of shortage of medicines and facilities, in terms of an emergency health response and in context of the emerging health frameworks? Thank you.
Thank you. Back there, David, I believe.
Thank you, David Sanders, People's Health Movement and University of Western Cape, South Africa. Thanks for an interesting panel. I address a question to Dr. Graf. So you've talked about emergencies. So there is a document coming before the Assembly, implementation of the international health regulations. So you mentioned in your talk about capacity development in countries, yet if one looks at the implementation of the IHR, nearly all of the investment, at least that I could find about, was on joint external evaluations. In other words, putting resources into, quite rightly, an external force which can act quickly and help countries to evaluate their state of readiness. However, if you look at the finances allocated, hardly anything for health workforce strengthening. So how do you build capacity in a country to respond to emergencies if there is little investment in the health workforce, which is at the core of any country preparedness?
Thank you. And last question over here, please. And then we'll have answers and move to the next panel.
Thanks for the awesome panels. I'm a medical student currently. My question is that we're now aware of that WHO is undergoing a series of reform at this moment, and we try to perform better reaction to emergencies, but the IHR we are now using has been adopted more than a decade ago. So my question is that, is there a potential or possibilities that we're going to adopt a new version or a refined version of IHR? Thank you.
Thank you. Peter.
Right. So the answer about a new IHR, it is not on the agenda. And if you want it to be on the agenda, then as a member state, you have every right to put it forward. But it's not something that we as a secretariat would steer. And the work at the moment is much more about ensuring that the IHR that we have and that we think is an excellent and functional framework and mechanism is operational and is utilized by all member states and secretariat alike. On capacity development in country and the focus on JEEs, So what we see is that, first of all, the JEEs in itself are a capacity building exercise. And we see experts from different countries work together, sometimes in their own country when they are the host, as it were, but then these same people travel to other countries to be experts in their own right, to advise on the strengths and relative weaknesses in systems elsewhere. So that in itself is a very useful exercise. What the JEEs should lead to, and by the way, the JEEs is just one of a series of instruments that are available. So the only one that has to be complied with is the self-reporting. That is ingrained in IHR. Then there's a number of other instruments, the JEE being one of them, that is being utilized, and the JEE as an instrument is being utilized to identify strengths and weaknesses, and ideally, and starting to work now, ideally is then followed by the development of a 5-year national action plan that is costed, that is prioritized, and where both the government itself and partners take responsibility for driving an agenda, including the funding thereof. On health workforce capacity, I can't agree more. In the end, it's all about the local capacity and it's the most efficient way of dealing with emergencies. And if the way we're looking at it at the moment is our role is to help ensure that minimum standards are set, that where necessary teams are exposed and trained and certified, not only to be able to respond within a national setting, but also to be able to help neighbors and globally if necessary. But we have to realize that this is within a much larger framework. This is what we deal with is a subset of capacity issues where let's say with a relatively small contribution to a much larger agenda on the health systems, something we need to recognize and something that as an emergency program, we want to contribute to that longer term, much broader health systems development agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Suzanne, any points you'd like to raise?
I think with respect to Venezuela and the shortages problem there, it's going to be a question of a member state bringing that specific example to the floor, should they wish to do so. Obviously, there have been many reports in the press about problems with access to medicines in Venezuela, and whether it's a problem with funding, with procurement, with quality, or I suspect all three, I think would be something that we would have to work on with our PAHO colleagues to see if WHO can help respond.
Thank you. And Santino, you didn't get a question, but is there something you really want to highlight?
No, actually, I'm saving your time.
Okay. So I'd like to thank this panel, and please do grab them for those bilateral discussions we spoke about. So we're linking up P&P, Patty and Peter. I would ask now, I hope everyone's in the room, I'm not sure about that. Please feel free. Thank you very much again. Thank you. Francesco Branca is here with us, the Director of the Department of Nutrition for Health. Is Anne-Marie here yet? Yes, she's coming. So we have Anne-Marie Warning, who's the advisor to the Director General on polio. And yes. And is Rüdiger here yet? Let's start with these two, and we're expecting Ian Smith as well, as you know, from the DG's office to brief us on the discussions on the WHO budget. So if we start with Francesco, the challenge of nutrition, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ilona, and I'm really pleased to receive this invitation. What I'd like to do today is really tell you why nutrition is a challenge. It's going to be discussed as one of the agenda items. We don't know exactly the date, it's towards the end of the week, is 15.4. This is the global burden of disease, so the reasons why people die or are sick. Look at the top one, dietary risk, 11.3 million deaths. Look at number 3, child and maternal malnutrition. And look at number 6, high body mass index, which is overweight and obesity. So I'm giving you a very good reason to say that really we need to tackle nutrition challenges, and we need to tackle them in all the countries. To this very dire picture, I also would like to say that this is even a terrible year because of the about 70 million people in 45 countries that are affected by food insecurity, 20 million only in 4 countries, South Sudan, Yemen, Somalia, and Nigeria, and we specifically have about 2 million children under 5 who are affected by severe acute malnutrition with a very high risk of dying. So this is what we call the double burden of malnutrition. The world is not divided into countries that have undernutrition and countries that have overweight. They're actually quite mixed. Even in very, in middle-income countries, you have simultaneously conditions of undernutrition and overweight, maybe in different age groups, maybe in different regions, but the two actually conditions are very much biologically related. A child who is born with low birth weight or a child who is stunting is going to grow into an adult with obesity and diet-related non-communicable diseases. So it's a global issue that has to be addressed with common solutions. So recognizing this, the Sustainable Development Goals have actually indicated that we should end hunger, achieve food security, and improve nutrition, and promote sustainable agriculture. And it talks about all forms of malnutrition. So nutrition in the SDGs is in itself a goal, but it's also a very important enabler to reach the health-related goals. If we don't address nutrition, we're not going to reduce the mortality from non-communicable diseases. If we don't address nutrition, we're not going to address mortality in children and women. So recognizing this, and this is actually what the paper is about, the second International Conference on Nutrition in 2014 has come with a framework for action, indicating a number of recommendations to act in multiple areas, in multiple sectors. And last year, after the SDGs, the General Assembly declared 2016 to 2025 as the decade of action on nutrition. So the Assembly will look at the work program of the Decade of Action on Nutrition. These are the areas of action. So it's, again, not new, but a reminder that we need to address nutrition in the food system. We need to address nutrition in the health system. We have to deliver essential nutrition actions. We need to have universal coverage of essential nutrition action. We need social protection to deal with nutrition appropriately. We need to have trade and investments to be nutrition sensitive. We need to have environments that provide and allow good food, whether it's offer of food in public institution, whether it's adequacy of environments to promote breastfeeding, and we need to have a good accountability system. Now, this document and the report to the Assembly illustrates what has been done by member states in the last 2 years. And you see actually some remarkable developments happening. One important development is that the Decade of Action is calling for the submission of smart commitment. At the Assembly, we often discuss global strategies, but we want to be sure that countries are very specific in their commitments. They put forward commitments that can be measured, that could be achieved in a reasonable time frame, and that they indicate the time frame. So this actually making smart the commitments of the Decade of Action is something that we are all, as a nutrition community, rallying behind. And I must say, I'm very proud to say that tomorrow, at 11 o'clock, the Minister of Health of Brazil is going to actually announce the first set of commitments of Brazil. And these are commitments to reduce obesity by providing healthy food in all public institutions, particularly schools in Brazil, by addressing marketing food to children, by setting up labeling systems, by even identifying pricing strategies through taxation to reduce the intake of sugar-sweetened beverages. So this is what the document is going to talk. It will also touch about the response of the UN, and I must say that it's unprecedented, but now in fact, all the UN organizations dealing with nutrition have a strategy. So this is the WHO strategy, which was launched the other day, WHO Nutrition Strategy. It's very complementary to what the World Food Programme and UNICEF particularly are doing, so we have a very good collaboration among us. The priorities for WHO are leadership priorities. WHO certainly has to lead to set the global nutrition agenda, has to influence other sectors, particularly the agriculture sector, and the social protection, the human rights space, to make sure that nutrition is highly included. So all these policies, global strategies are nutrition sensitive. WHO is influencing policy making at country level using its guidance. I mean, we are very strong in developing guidance based on systematic analysis of the science, so it's effective interventions, it's healthy diet. We will particularly work in the health system. We need to make sure that whole health system packages include nutrition intervention. We need to include that the design of health system has clearly nutrition there. We need to make sure that, for example, nutrition supplements are available and accessible to all those who need them. And finally, the monitoring. We need good data. I mean, so far, the data revolution in nutrition has been only a slogan, but we are now seriously tackling it jointly with other organizations. So, as I always conclude my talks, we're all working together, and we hope that this assembly will also be a milestone in the promotion of the work we're doing in nutrition. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like, because the two issues are so very, very different, let's ask if you have any questions to Francesco at this stage. in relation to the nutrition agenda? Yes, back there, please. And back there. So we have 2 there and 3. That's good. Thank you very much. No, I can't take more. And I'm trying not to take any 1 2 times. So, all right. The first person, please, go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you very much. My name is Martin Mendelson. I am at the School of Public Health at the University of Washington, Seattle. Dr. Branco, what, if anything, has the World Health Organization decided to do about the non-scientific attack on genetically engineered organisms as improvers of nutrition?
Thank you. Short and concise questions. Over here, please.
Hello, my name is Garge. I'm from People's Health Movement. I just wanted to ask regarding nutrition as well as ending childhood obesity technical topic. So here we have not seen anything in particular about trade wherein transnational food corporations or industries dumping unhealthy diet on the global south. And also when we are seeing at ending childhood obesity draft action plan, we see that it's not a treaty, binding treaty. So don't you think that it would be better and it would give teeth to the particular issue if it was passed out as a treaty?
Thank you. And I think there was somebody here, wasn't there? Yes, you.
Hi, I'm Vivian. I'm a Canadian medical student. I was wondering how you think we can reduce the influence of industry, for example, big sugar, on promoting negative influences on nutrition.
Thank you so very much. The commercial determinants of health, and please.
Thank you for the excellent question. So on genetically modified organisms, WHO is working on the assessment of the impact of biofortification. But biofortification can be done in many different ways. It can be done by selecting crops without any genetic modification. It can be done by adding nutrients to the soil, and it can be done by modifying the genes. We'll actually issue guidelines on that, looking at the real impact in real life. We will distinguish and will allow countries then to make their choices. I must say that the best available evidence is about the selection of particular crops that are rich in vitamins and minerals. So that seems to be the trend. On the issue around obesity and transnational corporations, there is a companion document at the Assembly, which is the work program of the Ending Childhood Obesity Commission. These 2 documents go hand in hand, and they're actually very clear about the action that is needed. Clearly, countries have to have a multi-pronged strategy and a compact of policies. That's exactly what, for example, Brazil is doing. The issue of a transnational company comes in when the food system has to be changed, and food that we get on the table should actually be changed to reduce sugar, fat, and salt. So WHO, as part of the Decade of Action on Nutrition, is planning to work with member states to actually develop some reference levels that would allow to reduce some of these components in foods. And I must say that this is done as an effect often of legislation. So I was talking yesterday to the French Director General of Health. They've just launched a labeling scheme, interpretive labeling. This is going to make the industry change the composition of the product. In UK, taxation of sugar-sweetened beverages starting in April has already led over 100 companies to change their reformulation. So this calls to leadership of the public sector and legislation in place. Sugar particularly, there are multiple ways to address sugar. First of all, there's now a recognition that this is an issue. It was not recognized, and this is because of the strong, solid guidance of WHO. It was challenged. It was challenged in the Assembly. but eventually the quality of the science made it happen. Now these guidelines are accepted, adopted broadly. The response is, of course, again, multiple strategies. The response is taxation of sugar-sweetened beverages. There's an annex of the NCD action plan, which is going to be discussed at the Assembly, agenda item 15.1. Good labeling of products and reformulation of products. But also making sure that the food that is offered to children, for example, in schools, does not contain high sugar. So multiple strategies that require public health leadership. Thanks.
Any question on the treaty? Anyone suggesting a treaty?
Not any longer, but in reality, what I just mentioned is the same content as the treaty. So let's say the aspects, the component of the treaty are clear, and many more countries, more and more countries are actually recognizing that they have to use these approaches, and they are implementing them. Would a treaty be something that comes in the future? Maybe, it's a future step. I know that this, treaties are not very popular among some member states, so probably it's going to be a long political journey.
Thank you very much. So now we move to the next issue, polio. And Anne-Marie Warning from the DG's office will speak to us about the polio transition planning, where we are right now, how it will influence a whole range of other programs in the future.
So, thank you very much, Ilona. And it's very opportune to be speaking about polio transition here, because the Graduate Institute has been very involved in it. And polio transition is enormously complex. It is going to be a daunting task. And I'd actually like to put you all in the sort of global context by quoting from the second paragraph of this document. Because when I come to present our WHO planning, you have to understand that we are only one of many partners. So the Graduate Institute in its publication says, ending polio will provide an enormous opportunity to ensure the legacy of the world's largest ever global public health initiative. But it will also mean the eventual dismantling of the global polio eradication initiative. Therefore, the GPEI is increasingly focusing on the legacy of polio eradication, on the one hand, the need to build resilience at the national level, and on the other hand, to create ownership and transition the many polio assets into the national health system. However, these transition processes are far from automatic, and that's precisely what we are recognizing. It goes on, and I will only quote 3 more lines. As a unique partnership in global health, the GPEI and its partners will require unprecedented reflection, determination, and political commitment to successfully complete these tasks. And we are just starting. So over the next couple of years, there will be a lot more discussion on that. And what I'm presenting now is entirely from the WHO partner perspective. But I would really suggest anybody coming to this agenda item in the World Health Assembly to put yourself in the global context by reading this document. So, polio
this was not planned, yeah.
So, where does the WHO transition planning come from? That is actually comes and has been kick-started into more action because of a decision that was taken and passed at the EB in January. And that decision was very specific. It requested the Director General to present at this 70th World Health Assembly a report that outlines 3 things: the programmatic, financial, and human resource-related risks resulting from the current winding down and eventual discontinuation of the GPEI. And we needed to present a first draft report to a meeting of member states before the end of April. So in this very small window of time between the January board And now this was what the Secretariat was tasked to do. So how did we in WHO set about it? A very small team was established within the Office of the Director General. I was called back from retirement, and the small team is myself and my colleague Anand sitting on the front row there. And together we reached out to the regions, Afro, EMRO, and Sierra, the country offices of the polio-affected countries, and we looked vertical across the organization, the 3 levels, but we also looked horizontally.
You can see it all here,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
otherwise we don't see you and hear you. That's the problem.
Good.
Does that?
So the focus of this report is the identification of the programmatic risk and the potential opportunities for mitigation seen from the WHO point of view. The human resource and financial indemnity risks associated with mitigation actions are also detailed in a report I will exemplify later. So, we managed to have a member state meeting on the 28th of April, and we were very satisfied with the great turnout and the participation from across all program areas of WHO and different regions, and we received some very relevant feedback on the report and some proposed next steps. So what were the summary observations? The programmatic risks are enormous and are daunting. Immunization, emergency operations, maternal and child health, neglected tropical diseases, and health systems, and a whole setup of subnational offices will be impacted. And they will be impacted big time, because it's quite clear that this enormous polio initiative has cross-subsidized so many other important public health initiatives. Many of the public health corporate decisions we have taken on measles and rubella, on SDGs, on deworming, on better nutrition, will be impacted when this polio initiative ramps down, unless we do it intelligently, with determination and reflection, as you heard from the Graduate Institute report. From WHO's point of view, there are also enormous human resource risks. We have just over 1,000 WHO staff paid from polio funds. These 1,080 staff is a slight reduction since the end of 2016, but that is just the staff. That means those people who are on temporary, fixed-term or long-term contracts and serving under the WHO human resources laws and regulations and staff support and those rules and regulations that would come in place if some of these people would have to be terminated. But on top of that, there are over 6,000 workforce. They are on what we call non-staff contracts, but there's a workforce out there of more than 6,000 people who are also paid through WHO on polio funding. And these staff, or this workforce out there, are absolutely essential in many countries for continued surveillance, in the immunization campaigns. These are piggybacked with surveillance for guinea worm. So the polio initiative is probably one of those initiatives we've seen. It's also been underway since 1988, so it's an old, very big, established program, has benefited so many other programs. For instance, in the area of neglected tropical diseases, the deworming programs are thought to become 30 times more expensive if they're not using the polio infrastructure. From a WHO perspective, thinking of the money that comes into our organization, if we have to terminate, and we will be terminating some of these 1,080 people, the most likely scenario is that that is going to cost us around 55 million in termination indemnities of moving people back to their own country, serving them notice and giving them the rules and regulations that they are entitled to. Naturally, we are hoping to mainstream some of these staff who are extremely talented, who have good experience, into other programs. But that will entirely depend on the money coming in. Whether the global public health community is seeing the advantages that we may gain if we do this transitioning correctly. I dare not even think of the consequences if we do not do it with that seriousness that is needed. There's also a lot of organizational risks, the complexity of actors. We're not just having polio ramped down. There are some of the affected countries that are also in for Gavi eligibility transitioning. There is a global financial crisis. We are not getting as much money to the development scene as we have seen earlier. So WHO is only one of the actors, but for our organization, this is going to have a huge impact. In the African region alone, some countries, Ethiopia, will have a program budget for Ethiopia for 2 years that goes from 39 million to 5 million. That is a very big cut over 3 years. So this is serious business. And how will we deal with this in the forthcoming assembly? The assembly discussion under agenda item 12.3 is going to be separated in 2 parts. Part 1 is polio eradication and the end game, the status update. The status update that gives us a legitimate belief that we are nearing the end and getting rid of polio in the world. Second debate will be on polio transition, and there you have the document A70/14-1, which is the document I explained about the programmatic, financial, and human resource risks. And then that has to be looked in conjunction with an annex that happens to be attached to the other document. That's not so elegant, but that was how it played out. But when we talk polio transition, we are talking about 3 things for WHO: the programmatic risks, the human resource risks, and the financial risks. And we also know already that there will be a draft decision proposed by member states, and that draft decision will instruct, as we see it now, the Secretariat to come forth with a strategic plan of how we see the transition planning taking place in WHO. And as we see it now, that strategic plan would need to be elaborated and be brought forward to the January EB 2018. And that decision, as we have read the drafts already, are also asking the Secretariat to ensure that the new Director General takes polio transitioning very, very seriously. And for an organization like ours, where 25% of the funds spent in 2016 came from polio funds, this is a major undertaking. So not only is it urgent, but it is also a public health imperative that WHO, together with other partners, do it correctly. And what we have provided now, and which will be discussed in the Assembly, is simply taking the first step of a journey, because this is going to be a global journey over some years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne-Marie. It was very important for us to draw this to your attention. Also, actually, now it's quite good that there'll be a budget discussion also afterwards. As Ian Smith comes and joins us, he says he will be here at 5:30. So that will be a very important part of our program. You have an opportunity now to ask some questions of Anne-Marie. Yes, please, over there.
Honorable.
It'll come.
Okay. Honorable Speaker, I'm the medical student from Taiwan, and I'm really concerned about the eradication of polio, which is a domestic situation had hindered polio eradication, especially in certain countries, such as in Pakistan. Pakistan, Taliban has refused health workers to come into the state, or even they have some violence towards the health workers. So do they have, does WHO had any plans toward the safety of the health workers to perform such vaccination?
Thank you. Are there other questions? Yes, please, back there, please. Is there a mic? Coming.
Hello, thank you. My name is Flora Hadera. I'm a master student of public health at the moment. I was wondering, from your presentation, I had the feeling that this transition planning is kind of urgent. So I was wondering, do you have the feeling that it's timely? Like WHO started the transition in time, or would it have been advantage to start it earlier, or is the fading out? How is it going? Thank you.
Thank you.
On the issue of staff, we would naturally hope that these staff that have been doing polio immunization can be used increasingly to also do immunization campaigns for the measles and rubella goals and meningitis, yellow fever, and so on. But again, that will depend on the funding, because the funding that we have been given so far has been for polio. And in fact, in the African region, all the immunization staff engaged and hired on polio funds are not called polio immunization staff. They're called immunization staff and are in fact delivering a much broader package. And the other question? This was also about the health workers that have been attacked. Yeah. The health workers that have been attacked is an increasing problem, and we have unfortunately seen that sporadically, but it's very serious. We have all WHO staff, and as Peter Graf also said in the emergency program, are normally covered, and we hope to do our best, by the minimum operating safety and security measures. But sometimes there are breaches, and you must recognize the most remote areas that we operate in. And I can only say that those staff are naturally compensated and cared for through our staff rules and regulations, but it's these things that happen.
Now here the question was, did WHO start too late with transition planning? Just say yes.
Well, yes. If you think me being called back by the DG is a measure of yes, we are taking it seriously, no, we must recognize that some member states have actually, since 2013, even Jean-Luc Bourchi here, our previous legal counsel, has been sitting through executive boards and World Health Assemblies where member states have drawn our attention to it. I think I'm most honest if I acknowledge that maybe we haven't been the fastest starter. But what we have achieved between the EB decision, and I think the EB decision was also actually telling us, get your act together. And I do think that we have increasingly over the last months gotten our act together. We have established a WHO-wide steering committee, which is actually headed by Ian Smith, Executive Director of the DG's office, also including senior representatives from regions. We've established a human resource working group. We are convening the WRs and asking them to be very active in the polio planning at country level. So yes, we may have been a little slow, but I think we are getting into proper revelations now.
Thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you to the two of you and ask Rüdiger Krecht to join us. Thank you very much. And you saw here we had two issues that are longer-term issues that actually take on WHO's work over a decade at times. That hopefully one is ahead of the curve on some of the nutrition issues, but you've also heard that the planning in relation to polio and polio transition was delayed, and that now there is an additional pressure on really resolving these issues, which are at various levels of financing WHO, of staff support, and of implications in countries, because as polio transition is going on, For many countries, there is transition from Global Fund money, there is transition from Gavi money, so there is a combined impact at country level which can be quite severe in relation to the resources, the health workers, etc., available. We'll have a broader look now at one of the key agendas of the Sustainable Development Goals, Sustainable Development Goal 3, which has really put universal health coverage back on the agenda. We have with us Rüdiger Krech, who is Director of Health Systems and Innovation at the Office of the Assistant Director General and here at headquarters. And Rüdiger, please give us a short brief where universal health coverage plus SDGs, SDGs plus universal health coverage is going to be discussed at the Assembly, and how and what you expect. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ilona, and I'm really grateful that we can discuss universal health coverage for a couple of minutes here. Also I'm grateful because there's not a resolution on universal health coverage to be expected during this assembly. But what we are going to have is a technical briefing by the Secretariat, and we're going to be very honored to have 3 Director Generals of WHO with us in this briefing. The former Director General, Dr. Gro Harlem Brundtland, the current Director General, Margaret Chan, and then the DG-elect. So we're going to hear from all 3 of them what has happened in the past and what is going to happen in the future. So for us at WHO, we're currently very much working with countries in getting aligned with the health security agenda. As you might have heard, I'm sorry I'm late here today, but as you might have heard, currently WHO is working on about 36 disease outbreaks. And so therefore we know that disease outbreaks happen all the time. And it depends very much on the resilience, on the strength of a health system, whether or not we're able to detect those outbreaks early, hopefully to prevent them in the first stage, but then, if not, to act very promptly on those outbreaks. You just got back from Berlin and had a great job in getting health ministers together to have a simulation exercise on it, which also showed the importance of resilient health systems in this matter. So what we know from research is that borders, and that is the international health regulations that have been renewed, borders as such cannot be closed down. So if you have an outbreak in one country, it is very unlikely that you detect all the cases at the entry of your border. What is much more likely is that cases actually come and cross borders, given the high mobility of today. And that means also that in the RHR, in the international health regulations, we need to pay much more attention to the rural health services, whether they work or not. It needs to be health services and health systems that reach everyone in every spot of the world. And I think the simulation exercise that you're just coming from has clearly shown that there's a lot of weaknesses that we all still face with regard to resilient health systems. What we also know is that universal health coverage is possible, and I'm saying this because universal health coverage, as you rightly said, is very much on the agenda of global health, very much enshrined in the Sustainable Development Goals. And that means it is not only a matter of developing countries, but it is a matter of all countries alike. Countries like Canada or Australia, with regard to their First Nations, Aborigines, do have issues with regard to their universal health coverage in leaving no one behind. And I could talk for my own country, which is Germany, where we have a lot of problems in transforming the health system to really be fit for purpose with regard to the challenges that we face in non-communicable diseases and demographic trends. So universal health coverage really is concerning all countries, and that is the shift of paradigm that we see coming from the Sustainable Development Goals. Development is for all countries alike in a globalized world. We are very different in our country approaches and the contexts, of course, in which we operate. But really, development is not only anymore for just the emerging economies or the developing countries. And I think that is very much the message that I would like to give here. What we see in developing countries, and then I'm coming to the close, is that we know that many countries in the last 15 years were able to finance more and more their health systems alone. When we started the journey in 2005, 12 years ago, many more countries were dependent on external budgets and financing gaps to fill those financing gaps because they were just purely unable to finance their health systems. Now we see there's many more countries who are able to do so, but it will depend on the best use of the domestic funding, and there is where WHO can really help in targeting those monies and making sure that the financing is sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rüdiger. And you will see, therefore, and that's why we thought we'd have a short inject with universal health coverage. First of all, because it's so central to the SDGs, because it's transcending practically every issue that is discussed at the World Health Assembly. And also, as I mentioned earlier, that as the reviews of the SDGs continue throughout the year, the in-depth reviews, Goal 3 and universal health coverage is, of course, part of that. And it will be important to see that those countries that have agreed to do those in-depth reviews to analyze and compare to what extent they have recognized the relevance and the importance of universal health coverage. You also know that practically all 3 DG candidates have put universal health coverage right up there in their election agenda, and therefore the event also that Rüdiger referred to, if one has that combined power of those 3 DGs with the opportunity for the new DG to also reconfirm that commitment and maybe already show first steps that she or he will be taking in that direction, can be a very important message for all programs of WHO and for all member states. So thank you very much, Rüdiger. And we'll move now to the WHO budget that everyone has been waiting for with bated breath. And I'm very glad that Ian Smith from the Director General's office has been able to come down. I think he's one of the most busiest people today. So please, Ian, take the floor. I don't know if you have some slides or if you want to talk from the rostrum or here from the chair. So please join us here and give people an understanding of what's being discussed and how. Thank you, Ian. Yes, you both. I was going to give you mine.
Oh, no, you should keep yours. Well, thank you. Thanks, Ilona. And first, may I apologise for being late. We've had a bit of a busy afternoon up at headquarters. And secondly, I have to say, I've been here in Geneva now for about 17 years, and this is, I apologise to say, my very first visit to the Graduate Institute, would you believe? So delighted to be here, and I'm sure you've had a very good afternoon already. It's getting towards the end of the afternoon, I know, so I will keep my presentation short, and then of course if there are questions on the programme budget, I will immediately say, I'm sorry, I don't know, and you'll get away very quickly. But no, I'm wondering if Imre is around. Has Imre Hollow come as well? He was going to... No, never mind. He's the guy who's done all of the hard work on the programme budget, so I don't want to take any credit for it. It's obviously there's an army of people who've been working on the programme budget now for several months. Just in terms of the process by which we develop a program budget, because some of you may not be aware just how long this process takes. We usually start a program budget development 2 years before it actually comes into force, as it were. 2 years before the date in which we start spending money against that program budget. It's a very lengthy process because, first of all, it's based on a bottom-up exercise, finding out from countries what are their priorities and identifying within each country 8 to 10 priorities which are reflected in the national plans and nowadays obviously reflected much more clearly in the goals for the plans for the Sustainable Development Goals. Each country that WHO has work in identifies 8 to 10 priorities. So that huge bottom-up exercise across the world takes place. So we'll be starting that almost as soon as we've finished getting approval through the Assembly this week on this, this programme budget. We'll be starting straight away planning for the next biennium. So it's a lengthy process. In addition to this bottom-up exercise, there is also a top-down process whereby we look at what member states have collectively agreed as being their priorities. So there's this, first of all, this bottom-up process which is based on individual member states' priorities, but then we look collectively as a multilateral organisation. What have our member states collectively given us a mandate to do? And there, of course, we go back to the Assembly and we have to look at the resolutions that have been adopted, particularly look at the global strategies that have been adopted in the Assembly, which lay out very often a timeline and a set of targets around a particular area of interest. And we try and accommodate all of those collective priorities also within a unified programme budget. And of course, there's a little bit of an exercise of a bottom-up and a top-down, trying to bring the whole lot together. Third thing we've got to do is look at, well, where do we know there is international interest in financing? And this is always very controversial because as an organisation which now is dependent for about 3/4 of its resources on donor funds, it inevitably means that we've got to look at what the donors have indicated they are prioritising in terms of where they wish to put their money. I mean, it's just a pragmatic approach. But that obviously arouses some concerns that the donors are in effect dictating the priorities of the organisation. And we've got to try and find a way of getting that balance between what is clearly a collective mandate and an individual mandate from countries, and at the same time try and make the budget realistic in the sense of what we anticipate we'll be able to do, where the resources will come. And if I just give you one example of where that has broken down in the past, and currently the clearest example is around non-communicable diseases. When we went through this exercise of bottom-up planning, we found that the single programme area where the majority of countries, over 100 of the 150 countries that took part in this exercise, over 100 of them clearly indicated that their number one priority was non-communicable diseases. And yet this has been the area within the programme budget that we have consistently found the most difficult to finance. There just doesn't seem to be, so far, that interest in financing NCDs. That's changing, and there's some encouraging signs and signals that development partners are beginning to see that non-communicable diseases are also present a development challenge, that you can't just assume that the development aspects of health are limited to communicable diseases. So that's one of the areas where we hope we will see further improvements over time in that recognition that NCDs also demand real attention and real resources. But it's a challenge because inevitably it means that we will set out plans, and they're always people always accuse us of them producing aspirational plans because we can't finance them. Well, I think what we're trying to get is a sort of a pragmatic aspiration, is perhaps the best way of putting it, in terms of what we put forward to member states as what we realistically think as an organisation we can do, and where we think we'll be able to finance it. But it's always a difficult one to get the right balance on. So, Having been through this process that started, as I say, a couple of years ago with this bottom-up process, we've then been to the regional committees with a draft programme budget last year. Each of the 6 regional committees had commented on it. We took those comments into account, and then we presented another programme budget to the Executive Board in January. And one of the big news items about that programme budget that we presented to the Executive Board in January was not so much about what we were planning to do or how much it will cost, but how we were proposing it should be financed. And we had taken, the DG had taken the recommendation that came out of the UN Secretary-General's high-level panel on global health crises and had proposed a 10% increase on our assessed contributions. Now, 10% increase on assessed contributions may sound quite a lot when the programme budget is only increasing marginally, but 10% of a relatively small amount is not a huge deal. And in fact, our assessed contributions amount at the moment to around 940 million. So this was really just a 94 million in what is effective, what is a 4 billion plus budget. Not a huge amount. Nevertheless, it was very clear in the Assembly, in the Executive Board in January, that even that amount was going to be a challenge for some member states. And we had effectively 3 positions being presented at that time. There was a group of countries, and we have to thank Germany for this, being very positive and very strong about, yes, this organisation needs sustainable financing. Assessed contributions are not only a sustainable financing mechanism, they also represent the shared interests of all member states, and they are clearly pooled and therefore independent. Nevertheless, and there were many supporters of that position, nevertheless there were a group of countries who said, whilst we think an increase in assessed contributions is appropriate, that amount is going to be a challenge for us, for a variety of reasons. Some because they had a zero nominal growth principle, and although they were willing to look at a potential increase on a case-by-case basis, an increase of that magnitude would probably kick in a few processes within their governments that would stop it completely. So they said, okay, but is there a way of making it a bit more manageable for us? And another group of countries who had a similar position were saying, yeah, we think you do need more, but we are, as we are developing as a country, our economic situation is improving. The proportion of the budget that we are responsible for is also increasing. So countries like China, Brazil, Mexico and others who are seeing quite a significant increase in their scale of assessments were suddenly faced with not just a 10% increase, but effectively sometimes a 30% increase or 20 or 30% increase if you compare it with a couple of years before. So they were also saying, if you can make it a bit more realistic for us, we would certainly be helpful. We'd be keen to look at it. And then we had a third group of countries which were saying, no way. and quite vociferously saying, no way. And they were demanding that instead of an increase in assessed contributions, we should simply find ways of introducing greater cost efficiencies and save the money that way. So those were the 3 positions that we were hearing in January. So we have now presented a new revised programme budget, which we first discussed just 3 days ago, is it now? It was on Thursday in the Programme Budget and Administration Committee up at headquarters. And the PBAC, the Programme Budget and Administration Committee, is a subcommittee of the board which reports usually to the board, but for this session that occurs before the Assembly, it can act on behalf of the board and transmit its recommendations directly to the Assembly. And it plays that role every 2 years in relation to the programme budget. So they had a lengthy discussion on the programme budget on Thursday, and they're making the recommendation to the Assembly that, and here's the good news, we adopt the programme budget as presented with the 3% increase. We came down from 10 to a 3% increase, and that now seems to have got broad support from member states. So we are, I would say, I think most member states, and I think now it's gone beyond the Secretariat, now it's no longer in effect the DG's programme budget, it's now the budget that the PBAC is presenting to the Assembly. We're quietly confident that this will get accepted. So that 3% is a significant change. It's the first time we will have had an increase in assessed contributions for 10 years. The first time for 10 years. So it's taken some time to get agreement on having a further increase. And it doesn't mean automatically that we will get another increase in another 2 years' time. There's going to be another debate, I'm sure, at that point on it. But it's good news in one respect. It gives a clear signal that even in a situation globally where there are concerns about financial situations, there are concerns politically in many countries, there's the other constraints that several countries are facing around political shifts towards populism and nationalism in many countries. Despite all of that, there is confidence in WHO that is allowing these member states to agree to this increase this year. So we're pleased. Of course, we would have loved a lot more than 3%, but 3% is a good signal. What are the other changes in the budget, though? Because it's not just the money that's important. In fact, the money is the last thing. And the financing of it is the last thing. The important thing starts with what are we trying to do? What are we trying to achieve through this programme budget for the next 2 years? And I think there are 3 areas to highlight in terms of what we're trying to achieve. The first is obviously aligning the work of WHO fully with the Sustainable Development Goals, looking at how WHO can contribute through its work to a globally agreed development agenda, and with a strong focus, particularly on universal health coverage. And that I hope you'll see in the budget, now in the programme budget, is better reflected. The version we submitted in January didn't really quite get it right. As one of the member states commented at that time, great start, meaning the introduction, lousy finish, meaning if you look through the rest of the programme budget, you just couldn't see the SDGs there. So we've looked at how we can take not just the big, bold verbal statements at the beginning, but then looking at how we can reflect the contribution to the Sustainable Development Goals throughout all of our programs, the 30-odd programs that we had, throughout all of our outputs, throughout all of our results, so that there's a clear signal that this is all about the SDGs. We think it's an improvement. We don't think we're quite there yet, and I think we'll probably see the next programme budget for 2020-21 much better reflecting that. But that's the first signal, make sure that we're aligned with the SDGs. The second big signal is making sure that we can reflect the new mandate that we have for our work in emergencies. And as you all know, the crisis with Ebola in 2014-15 led to a lot of soul searching, both within WHO and outside, within member states, within the UN system, about what does the world need to have in place in order to prevent, detect and respond to primarily, obviously, outbreaks of disease, but also other health emergencies. And there's been an enormous amount of work in that. And again, I should just express our appreciation to Ilona for the role that she's played in many parts of that over the last two to 3 years, in putting together a clear plan of action for our work and then building the capacities within the organisation, but also helping member states, countries, to build those capacities that they need to prevent, detect and respond to outbreaks and other health emergencies. So there's a big piece in the new programme budget around our work in emergencies. And then the third area to highlight is this emerging area of antimicrobial resistance, which is again a major issue that's come up in recent times. So those are the sort of the big 3 highlights they will see clearly reflected. Will this get through next week? Well, it'll be taken up on Wednesday morning in Committee A, and there'll, I'm sure, be another discussion. There'll be discussion about how we can do better on cost savings, on value for money. And there'll be certainly a call for us to better align our work with the SDGs, or to continue to do so. But as I say, we are quietly confident that yes, this will be a budget that member states can all come behind next week.
Thank you very much, Ian, for that very clear briefing. Over to you. Who has some questions? Yes, back there. Let's start straight away. Please have short questions, then Ian can get some time to answer.
Hi, my name is Ashkan Nasser. I'm in the public health program at the University of Southern California. I was wondering, with regards to the 3 programs you were speaking about, Do you have a specific focus, or are you equally distributing funds between these two programs?
Over here. Yes. Go ahead.
Hi.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Hi. I'm Linda Freed. I'm the Dean at Columbia University's School of Public Health. I was wondering if you could shed some light on the disparity between the high priority on NCDs and the mismatch in allocated funding, and what actions or data or evidence or recommendations are needed to resolve that.
Thank you. Will you just pass it on to... Yes, go ahead.
I'm Rang San from Thai Health Promotion Foundation, but as a part of Thai delegation here. We are looking at about the same pot of money and asking for 3% more. A part of it, right? You said about 1/4 of it, which is gonna get not a lot, but it seems going forward there's a lot more demand coming up. Director Kretsch mentioned about identifying innovative source of funding. Thai Health Promotion Foundation is a syntax-based, getting about 1 or 2% of national health for health promotion. Philippines and many other countries are doing a lot of innovative financing, and I think it's one way to go. But I want to point out another part is that at WHO country level, we do have CCS, right? The country collaboration strategy. In Thailand, we're trying to use WHO as 20 or 30%, the rest coming from Thai partners, like my organization or ministry. That might be another way going forward, that if you allow that innovation to take place in country level, then you don't have to put that money in more in the future. Thank you.
Thank you for raising the country level as well. Please go ahead back there, yes.
Hi, sorry for coming in again, but this is not to Ian. I'm really sorry.
Will you introduce yourself
Okay,
again?
my name is Gargia. I'm from People's Health Movement. So I'm really sorry this question is not to Ian, but to fellow friends who are sitting on the other side of the stage. So most of the time what's happening is that countries are not giving assessed contributions properly, the member states, and we kind of come, end of the day we kind of pose as global health advocates at WHO, but when we go back to our own countries, many of us fail to act on these issues. It's a very ideal place. Geneva is a really good place where we can come up with hashtags like I'm a global health advocate, WHA 70. But what is it that we are doing when we go back to our countries? Are we actually acting on our governments, bringing about changes in politics and making them contribute more to the WHO? Or are we just becoming a hashtag in the past? So I'm really sorry, this is not for the dais, but it's on the other side about the inabilities and limitations that we are going through. Thank you.
But thank you for that. It's all about how do you create the political commitment in countries that they act accordingly within the WHO. For me, it was very interesting being at the G20, where the Chancellor of Germany opened the meeting of the health ministers and said very clearly, I hope to be able to motivate you here to support the budget of the WHO, to increase it, to fill the contingency fund. And because all the ministers had just had a lunch together, she said to them, there is no free lunch. So both in terms of what Germany expects of you, but also in terms of if you want things produced by the WHO, somehow you have to pay for it. And I think much more thinking around advocacy along those lines, as you indicated, is really a very important issue all around the world, not just in the so-called donor countries. Are there one or two more questions to Ian? And then we'll round up by giving him the last word to give a response to that. Patty, I think, had a... You're not? Okay. Anybody else? Okay. Yes, there's two here, and then I'll hand back to Ian. It'll come.
Sarah Ween, I'm a health reporter with Politico, and there I'm going to ask a very stereotypical question. There was an AP report this morning with some pretty big numbers for travel by WHO officials, fairly luxurious accommodations. Has that been reflected in the budget, and are you concerned that that is going to affect member states' willingness to agree to this new budget? Thank you.
And the lady next, I think. No? You didn't want to speak? Yes, you did. Sorry. Yeah.
Thank you. Shireen Lindsay-Hurst from the Institute for Media and Global Governance. Anne-Marie Werning mentioned that there would be a potential possible budget cut for the Ethiopian budget from 39 million to 5 million. How do you envisage plug a gap to deliver the programs? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, over to you, Ian.
Thank you.
Easy questions. Good.
Okay. So let me quickly go through them. So specific focus or equal distribution in relationship to the three priorities. Focused. I mean, it depends on the scope of work that we are planning. The budgets are based on what we plan to do. And in terms of, for example, the emergencies, it's a major piece of work, obviously. And therefore, there's a significant amount going into the emergencies program. That's the big area, really, of focus. So I wouldn't say equal distribution between the three areas I mentioned, but do go to the detail, have a look at it. Linda, the disparity between priorities and allocation of funds. I think I presented it quite, I hope, realistically, but I think there's also a degree of optimism that we need to bring to this, and that's to look back over the years at what's happened when there have previously been areas which have been neglected, and what is it that's then happened over time. And I think if we were to take just a couple of examples, go back to, I started my work in WHO, my career in a specific element of public health in TB. And if you go back to the mid-90s, early 90s, I mean, TB was the neglected of the major infections. And then there's been profound change in the financing for TB over the years. Huge increase. It's taken time, but it's been massive. Look at neglected tropical diseases, how they were, that's why they were called neglected. And yet look at now the investments that are going into NTDs. Obviously still not enough, but a major change. Now, will that happen with NCDs? We all obviously want that. Will it happen? I think the optimist in me says it's bound to, because when you look at the burden, when you look at the growing trends, when you see what the costs are for health services in managing people with NCDs over time, inevitably people are going to get the message that we need to finance prevention, we need to finance care, but we need to finance prevention. That really does take much more than we are currently doing. What is a little disturbing, though, is that it's several years since we had the New York high-level meeting on NCDs. And when you look at what the investments have been since that time, I wouldn't say they give us enormous optimism that the resources are just going to go through the roof in the coming years. So I think there's still a lot more work needed in that area, particularly around building the case, making the case, helping people to understand that this is an area we have to take really seriously. Otherwise, we're going to be seeing the children that are currently now being born and entering infancy and childhood. That generation in 20 or 30 years' time are facing a massive burden of disease. The question, I'm sorry, I need to put my glasses on again, don't I? And see what I'm... There we go. Innovative financing at the country level, thank you. Great, and that's gone on there has been fantastic with Thailand. It really has been a fascinating process of getting agreement on how the WHO finances can leverage at the country level more resources from partners at the country level, not just government, but also some other partners at the autonomous organisations like the Thai Health Promotion Foundation to invest in health in a joint shared plan. Great work, great example. And I know there'll be lots of people looking at that as another way in which funds for the country, and I think this is the important thing, it's not funds for WHO, it's funds for the country can be mobilised on health outcomes. And that, I think, is a fascinating piece to look at. Increasingly, donors are putting their money at the country level as well. It's not just the national domestic investments. There are donor investments still. The bank has got a massive increase in IDA. A lot of that's going to be going to, obviously goes to the country level, and there's going to be an increasing role for the other international partners in supporting the implementation of activities using those funds. So there's some, good prospects in that respect. But I think we do need to be looking at that more and more, particularly for middle-income countries, lower middle and upper middle-income countries, is how the resources can be mobilized not just internationally but domestically to deliver on health. It's a great example. Couple of final questions then. The Politico, the AP article around travel, a little unfortunate. I mean, I think that was written with intent, say. There's so much in that article that is just completely wrong. I mean, the first thing is to say that it's staff who travel. For the amount that they're quoting, I think, is 200 million. Well, that's all travel. That's everybody traveling. It's not just staff. I mean, we pay for far more people, experts, member states, to travel than staff travel. But it's unfortunate that it's sort of presented as if it's all of our staff just swanning around the world. It's just simply not true. And in fact, our travel costs for the last, compared for 2016, compared with 2015, dropped 14% through diligence to reduce costs. So travel is essential if we're going to get round and get the work done. And if people are going to be able to come here, like to the Assembly, and get the work done, travel is going to always be a key part of our work. And we are firmly committed to making sure that travel cost that we are responsible for is done as efficiently as possible. And we'll be obviously continuing to look at ways of reducing those costs. So I would not necessarily accept all of the allegations that are made in that article. The question about Ethiopian budget, that's, I believe, Anne-Marie, I believe it's specifically in relationship to polio. Yeah, and that's part of this ongoing review that we're looking at in terms of the polio transition. And there's some, this is it's a critically important area. You'll see it's one of what we've identified as being one of the top risks for not just for WHO, but for ensuring a transition from polio eradication into maintaining and sustaining eradication, and at the same time ensuring that all of the other programs that have benefited from the work on polio eradication are not compromised in any way, immunization, surveillance, and so on. So there's been an intensive piece of work around that. I can't comment specifically on the Ethiopian issue, but I can say that for all of the countries involved in this, they're each going through both a country-by-country assessment of their needs and the potential impact of a reduction in polio financing, but we're also looking at it programmatically. What does it mean for immunization globally? What does it mean for surveillance globally? We're looking at all of these issues to make sure that there is a managed transition over the next 2 to 3 years as we achieve polio eradication, which will be a fantastic achievement, an absolutely extraordinary achievement. And then maintain that and sustain all of the other programs that are so critically important at the country level in public health.
Thank you very much. Let's say thank you to Ian for coming specially and briefing us. Thank you. And I'll ask John to come and join me here again. And you had here a warning about all the facts. In one part of my life, I was the head of communications of WHO. And every year, a week or so before World Health Assembly, there would be an article in the Wall Street Journal making a point about why WHO was dealing with such ridiculous things as tobacco control instead of focusing on the tropical diseases. So, you get it in all ways, and now that one can't use the NCD argument anymore, which is a way of progress to some extent, other issues are being raised. So the point about, as you said, it's probably not by chance that such an article comes today and is used to influence the budget discussions at the WHO. So I'd like to hand over to John to round up our discussions and our afternoon. Please, John.
Thank you very much, Ilona.
Thanks to all of you for coming. In the context of what Ian Smith was just talking about and our earlier discussion of the Health Emergencies Program with Peter Graf, I would like to mention, and the World Bank has asked us to mention this, that the International Working Group on Financing Preparedness is going to issue recommendations on ensuring sustainable funding for the first line of defense against pandemics, prevention, identification, and containment of infectious disease outbreaks at a national level. And that's a big report that will be coming out on Thursday morning that's directly relevant to the discussions that we've had today. When we began this 3 years ago, Alon and I really were hoping that we were going to be able to end up with better prepared attendees at the World Health Assembly, both from member state delegations and from all others who attend. I hope that you'll all agree that you're better prepared and much more knowledgeable now than you were 3 hours ago. To me, this was an incredibly important discussion about so many of the important processes and procedures, the ways to prepare for the World Health Assembly from a disparate group of panelists, and then the key issues that we'll be discussing. We don't claim that these are all the issues, and our apologies if your most important issue wasn't discussed, but it's the kind of thing that we try to pick the ones that we think are going to be most controversial and most important, and I hope we, for the most part, succeeded in that. Both have great staffs, and I do want to thank them and the Graduate Institute itself for hosting this, because it's really a major effort on the Graduate Institute's part, but we think it's very much worthwhile. So thank you again for coming.
I'd also like to say thank you to all of you. Thank you to all the speakers. See you again next year, and see you at some other events here during the week. Bye-bye.